Thank you. If you agree, Mr. Chairman, let's say it's 7:45 now. Let's say we start at 7:50. Thank you. So a 5 minute screen break, and we'll start at 7:50. Okay, it's now 7:50 as suggested. So back to you, Carlos Manuel. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, William, and welcome everybody to today's 61st council meeting, Wednesday, December the 8th. Before going into our first agenda item, let me remind everybody the agenda for today. We'll begin these sessions with the report of the chairperson of staff. Then we'll follow up with agenda item number 10, relations with the conventions and other international institutions. And we will close with agenda item number 11, note on the organization on the 7th GEF Assembly. With this, I would like to begin with agenda item number 8, report of the chairperson of the Scientific and Technical Advisory Panel. I would like to invite my co-chair to lead this agenda item. Good morning, Mete, over to you.
Thank you very much, Carlos Manuel, and good morning. Good morning to you, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. So we will go straight into the report of the Scientific and Technical Advisory Panel, also called STAP. And I will invite Dr. Rosina Beerbaum to introduce document GEF/STAP/C.61 in .01 report of the STAP. Please, Rosina, the floor is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from -8 degrees Celsius here in Michigan. Looks a bit like this picture. I'll begin and end today with a wonder of nature that may appeal to younger children, for those of you who have them. This is an Adelie penguin named Pingu, who was found in New Zealand, 3,000 kilometers away from its home in Antarctica. He was underweight and dehydrated, but Pingu is also the name of a Swiss-British children's show that your children may know. He was taken in by a rehabilitation unit, fed a fish smoothie, and put back in the water the next day. This is only the third Adelie penguin to make it to New Zealand, and scientists believe that long journey could be related to climate change because the warmer waters are causing fish to go deeper into colder waters, and the fish are scarce and forcing penguins to go further at sea to find their food. And for the Adelie penguin populations in general are decreasing in Antarctica, where warming is greatest. Next. Here is the STAP team of science experts. Unlike Pingu, most of us have not roamed far away from home due to COVID. However, we are recruiting a new panel member for the chemicals and waste because sadly, our wonderful colleague, Jami Dukatima, who is shown in the middle of the lower line, is no longer able to continue because of ill health. We wish him and his family well. And the CEO will be writing to all of you shortly with the formal notification and the job description. So I'd be very grateful if you would share it widely within your networks so that we can recruit a wonderful pool of the very best scientists. And we're particularly interested, of course, in applicants from recipient countries in this case, and especially women scientists. So the position is now posted in the journal Science and Nature, and the closing date is February 1st. Next, please. Here is the running order for my presentation if you go clockwise, and next. So I will start first with the science, and there are so many exciting new reports. Nico, if you would advance it, please. Thank you. I can only cite a few this morning, but I would argue that all of these have implications for the GEF, both in the urgency to achieve transformational change, but also the necessity to work across the multilateral environmental agreements to get multiple co-benefits quickly, which of course is GEF's unique role. Next. First, let me take on some of the climate reports. The Glasgow Summit produced progress, but we all know we can't rest. And in these next 4 slides, I'm going to quickly summarize 4 new reports, but basically they're all saying with slightly different depictions that stabilizing at 1.5 degrees C is still possible, but very, very tough, and much more near-term global action is required. This report by Future Earth concludes that in order not to exceed the 1.5 degree threshold, we have to reduce annual global emissions by 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide each year. And all of these lines represent hitting net zero, which is that horizontal x-axis in different years. So maybe just look at the yellow line in the middle of the graph. If we reduce carbon dioxide emissions 2 billion tons a year, we could hit net zero in 2040. But you see in the circle, that only gives us a 50% chance of staying under 1.5. And if we wait until 2050, which is that last line on the right, we only have a 1 out of 3 chance. So time remains of the essence and near-term action crucial. And remember, as we discussed at the last council and yesterday, much near-term action can be had from nature-based solutions on land and sea, from protected areas and restoration and improved management. And as well, the Build Back Better, Greener after COVID plans that countries espouse must ramp up globally with clean energy and infrastructure. And these are all things GEF is promoting. Next, this is a report put together by WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, on behalf of the UN Secretary General, and it's a compilation of science findings from 10 different international programs. Well, many of these points would be familiar to you if you could read them. Let me just summarize. The report reiterates that climate change, recent climate change, is unprecedented for thousands of years, that emissions have bounced back to pre-pandemic levels, concentrations are at record high, more extreme heat, drought, floods are likely, and that COVID exacerbates the climate health hazards. Sea level rise is accelerating, and once again, we are now at about 1.1 degree above pre-industrial levels, so the admonition that the 1.5 degree window is closing. And I would just say yesterday, the EU's Copernicus Atmospheric Monitoring Service reported carbon emissions from wildfires broke records around the world this summer in the Northern Hemisphere. And now we know the Southern Hemisphere fire season is just starting. We see that climate change has created, if you will, a new normal for many extreme events. Next, UNEP's emission gap report is out, and this is complex, but let me walk you through it. It shows that current policies have reduced carbon emissions compared to where we were in 2010, which is shown as that very outer circle. But that current nationally determined contributions represented by the red rimmed arrow will not get us to the 50% reduction we need by 2030, this decade, and that is shown by the green rimmed arrow. And at the bottom of the graph, in that green oval, you see a bar where those additional emission reductions can come from. And agriculture and nature-based solutions are 1/3 of those needed reductions this decade, again, through protected areas, better land management, and restoration, all areas of GEF's focus. And next, our 4th report shows that we are no longer, thank goodness, talking about temperature increases of 3.7 degrees C, which would be in that red zone on the thermometer. We have moved to 2.7 degrees, maybe to 2.4 degrees. And if we make all our net zero pledges, we can move perhaps to those last 2 bars of the 2 degrees C and below range. So again, the glass is half full. We have potentially shaved off 1.5 degrees with Paris, with our new NDCs, our 2030 targets. And if we achieve those 2050 net zero targets, we'll have a shot at getting below 2 degrees. And with Glasgow's agreement now on the faster ratchet and revisit in 22, hope is still alive, but we cannot rest. Next, please. And now moving on to ecosystems, a new study by Conservation International maps places that need to be protected to avoid a huge loss of carbon. And these ecosystems contain what we call irrecoverable carbon. That is dense stores of carbon that, if released due to human activities, could not be recovered in time to prevent the most severe impacts of climate change. Very interestingly, half of that irrecoverable carbon is concentrated in just 3 to 4% of the land. So knowing which ecosystems contain the greatest irrecoverable carbon stores can help governments decide which 30% of land to protect by 2030, which, as you know, the goal is 30% of land and seascapes protected by 2030. There are 4 areas highlighted in that big top map, and they're shown in larger size below. So from left to right, the temperate forest of northwestern North America, but the largest and biggest density are those next 3 regions. The second is the tropical forests and peatlands of the Amazon. Third, the Congo Basin, and fourth, the islands of Southeast Asia. So more than a third of that irrecoverable carbon is stored within the government recognized lands of the indigenous peoples and local communities. The GEF invests in all these areas through the Sustainable Landscapes programs in the Amazon and the Congo, as well as through the Food Systems Land Use and Restoration Impact Program. And we should be sure this carbon is not lost as we design programs and projects in GEF 8. Next. This report from the UN Office for Disaster Reduction underscores that drought poses a significant risk to achieving many of the Sustainable Development Goals. And on the left, you see a map where projections at 1.5 degrees C and drought compared to the drought hazards on the right at 3 degrees C. And if you just focus on Africa, you can see there wouldn't be that much change in drought frequency at 1.5 degrees, although we don't want any. But at 3 degrees C on the right, almost the whole continent can expect several drought events each decade. And the report goes on to note that this threat can be substantially reduced by proactive approaches to drought risk management. And GEF projects now apply, as you know, climate risk screening and support drought early warning systems, disaster risk management plans, and improve groundwater management, just to mention a few that are related to building capacity for drought risk management. And we also, of course, address drought in the drylands IP and support enabling policy and institutional frameworks on land degradation neutrality. So in GEF 8, the land degradation focal area will continue to deepen these efforts because it is responding, as you know, to the 2019 Convention to Combat Desertification COP, which happened in India, to develop guidance to help mitigate the effects of drought in projects and programs. Next, there are ocean changes underway. Recent studies have generated new evidence showing that climate change is affecting characteristics of the oceans, such as sea surface temperature, oxygen concentration, and acidity, known as the biogeochemical components of the ocean. And this figure, where the continents are shown in gray, illustrates how under a high emission scenario, most of the ocean shows up here as orange to red, which, as the bar beneath it explains, indicates 60 to 80% being significantly altered. Now, if you look at the little squiggles, circles, roughly round areas in the ocean parts, the irregular shapes, those are large marine protected areas. And virtually all of those will be affected. Yet we know they're key to preserving marine biodiversity, ensuring the health of the ocean ecosystems. So these changed and novel conditions may cause culturally and economically important species to migrate or possibly go extinct. And so we need to think about all that now as we strive to protect 30% of the land and oceans by 2030. Will those areas persist as climate changes? Next, please. And climate change is affecting even the most pristine parts of the Amazon. Tom Lovejoy, former STAP chair, is the co-author of this paper. So we know climate change affects species survival, and South America faces great extinction risks due to climate change. But this paper is showing there are nuances we are only barely beginning to understand. Climate change is also affecting species shapes and their development. So 4 decades of data show us that birds that live in the higher parts of the Amazon trees are most exposed to heat and drier conditions. And these birds had dramatic changes in body weight and wing size. They're getting lighter in weight and longer in the wings. And this study suggests they are adapting to the hotter, drier climate by reducing what we would call wing loading and becoming more energy efficient in flight. That's pretty fast adaptation, but it is important for species survival. And 2 of the gorgeous birds that have exhibited reduced mass and increased wing length are the golden-headed manakin on the left, and on the right, the white-plumed antbird. I would note that just yesterday, we do like to be current, in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, there was a new report on amphibians, and it found a strong link between temperature and frog aging, with climate change's warmer temperatures leading to shorter lifespans in all but one of the amphibians studied, as if the global amphibian population needs any more stresses. But we think that the warmer temperatures are decreasing amphibian overwintering or hibernating that normally slows aging. So there's lots of devil in the details of how climate change is affecting our species. Okay, next, on to STAP's report and recent work. Next. Our South-South Knowledge Exchange report is up, and I presented at, I think it was a year ago at the December Council, STAP's initial perspective on GEF 8. And there we recommended that GEF codify monitoring, evaluation, and learning to develop a knowledge management system that documents best practices, what works and what doesn't, because we know we won't succeed in delivering transformational change if we don't learn from past investments. So we need to know what works and what doesn't work and why and how, and in what context. And soon you'll see in my next slide that knowledge management is one of STAP's 8 enabling elements for good project design. But I think we all agree that as of now, knowledge management is still an underexploited resource, but it should be a primary source of value for the GEF. So I am delighted that GEF is beginning the process of developing a new knowledge management and learning system. And this will inevitably take some time, but in the interim, STAP has been thinking about some intermediate steps that could be taken, in particular on South-South Knowledge Exchange, a topic which I know is very close to the heart of the CEO. And of course, South-South Knowledge Exchange is not new to the GEF. Our 22-page STAP paper looks at GEF and its agencies and other institutions to see what's been learned, what the challenges are. In it, we suggest some interesting groups we could partner with and learn from, such as the Science Panel for the Amazon, the SDG Academy of Practice, WOCOT, the World Overview of Conservation Approaches. And then at the CEO's request, we make some recommendations for GEF 8 programming in the country support programs, the GEF Knowledge and Learning Strategy, as well as for the IAPs, IPs, and future IPs. And so in short, our recommendations include a very general one, organize knowledge in a coherent manner and organize it from the perspective of the potential users, making it easy to access and search, and codify it in terms of best practices and approaches rather than just by project or by program. And then second, systematically harvest the lessons learned in developing and implementing the current crop of integrated programs and apply them in the formation of the next generation of integrated programs. Third, we suggest developing a database on lessons learned in the small grants program that have involved South-South knowledge exchange. And fourth, empowering GEF operational focal points with the right skills and understanding of how to define knowledge exchange needs and help develop, implement, measure, and report knowledge exchange results. And so we're discussing, staff is discussing with GEF SEC, how we can provide training for the operational focal points, perhaps on things like theory of change or our enabling elements. And we're thinking first both for Latin America and for Africa next year. Next slide, please. Another report that we've just posted is STAP's enabling elements for good project design. And you may recall that over the last 5 years, STAP has produced reports on the common theme of how to design projects, draw on the science and the experience of the GEF, how to develop a sound theory of change, good multi-stakeholder dialogue, etc. So this new report synthesizes our advice in one place. And we hope that adopting these enabling elements would not add to overall project work, but actually reduce the complexity of the project design process and help to, if you will, de-risk projects, increasing the likelihood of delivering durable outcomes that contribute to transformational change. So yes, as Nico is doing, we're going through the process here. On the left, number one is a systems thinking approach and developing a theory of change, fundamental to achieving better integrated outcomes and to determine what are necessary and sufficient actions to make a difference. Two is doing this well will require engaging the right stakeholders and accessing existing knowledge to identify the challenge, the leverage points, and to think through future changes that could derail the process. Third, getting this kind of upfront buy-in leads to benefits which are more likely to be robust and durable in the face of future change. Fourth, be explicit about behavioral change and analyze incentives to help drive the desired change. Fifth, invest in innovation for better solutions. Sixth, use GEF funding efficiently to achieve as much as possible. And the resources invested require taking an integrated approach to delivering multiple benefits to get this kind of efficient use. Seventh, consider how we can scale investments to achieve transformational outcomes. We know that proper stakeholder engagement builds shared ownership, improving the chance of scaling to achieve transformation. And eighth, establish knowledge management systems right up front, but also keep them going after the project ends to support monitoring, evaluation, and learning, which can also facilitate adaptation to changing circumstances. So again, adopting these for good project design, we hope will reduce the complexity of the process and help to de-risk project and truly, in a way, help prevent against surprises mid-implementation. Next, our third report is how to design circular economy projects. You may recall that at the assembly in Da Nang, Vietnam, I presented STAP's advice on two circular economy reports, plastics and the food system. And then at the June Council, we presented STAP's advice on circular economy and mitigation. And we know that circular economy approaches are important, an important tool in delivering global environmental benefits and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So we're really happy that GEF has already funded a number of circular economy projects, including in plastics and textiles. And there's increasing interest in adopting the approach in all sectors. So we thought now would be the time to consolidate what we've said in the previous 3 reports and produce a step-by-step guide on how to develop circular economy approaches. As you might expect, the how-to guide is very much based on the previous STAP enabling elements, systems analysis, theory of change, engaging stakeholders, behavioral change, monitoring, evaluation, and learning. But in circular economy projects, you also have to analyze the material flow and figure out intervention points in the whole system that breaks the take, make, waste linear process and maximizes benefits from both the inputs and the outputs. So we hope you'll find this guide useful. And next, our ongoing work. So on Blue Economy, we have provided guidance on the GEF 8 Healthy Oceans IP and the IW focal area, but we are also looking at Blue Economy writ large and thinking more broadly about GEF investments on given the latest science and practice. It's been a while since STAP has delivered reports, for example, our 2 previous ones on source to sea and areas beyond national jurisdiction. So we're having early consultations with the agencies and other experts. And it seems in particular that GEF Blue Economy investments really can be integrated across multiple issues since we are so well situated across all environmental dimensions. So thinking in the Blue Economy about toxic pollution, biodiversity conservation, climate mitigation, freshwater and marine issues. So we have a unique ability to focus across these. Second, of course, they need to be durable across a variety of scenarios. And we'll consider, of course, climate risk explicitly, but there are other stressors that we need to think about. And our investments will need to work with institutional and financial mechanisms in the Blue Economy to sustain impact over time. We are seeing this more in recent GEF Blue Economy projects, and we want to learn from these and see how they might be replicated. And of course, we want Blue Economy interventions to be transformative since time is short. And so they will need to address one or more of the 4 transformation levers identified in the GEF 8 strategy. So we will offer additional detail on some specific areas that we think might be ready for priority investment and additional recommendations on Blue Economy. So, things like how to ensure that the Blue Economy investments are inclusive and address trade-offs. We are planning a workshop in early 2022, and we will report more on this at the June Council. This is a picture of seaweed farmers in Tanzania tending to their crops. All right, moving on, we are also continuing to work on adaptation. The GEF 8 programming direction makes several references to the desirability of collaboration between the GEF Trust Fund and the LDCF, including through joint programming. And so we have been working with GEF on what we're calling a decision tree for project developers to improve the effectiveness of projects and durability. And it's currently being tested by applying it to previous LDCF projects. So the decision tree is basically asking 3 very simple questions. Is the project appropriate for LDCF funding? Do interventions meet a particular adaptation need or demand? And how can that intervention maximize benefits to people and the environment? And so our early analysis using this screen on previous projects is that all LDCF and SCCF projects have supported improving what we would call adaptive capacity. And many have also invested in activities that are meant to minimize exposure to climate change or the sensitivity to climate change impacts. And very excitingly, there has been a gradual shift, shall we say, away from emphasis on gray infrastructure to nature-based solutions, which is a welcome move. So stay tuned for more on this at the next council. And let's see, these pictures, the top one was taken by STAP's own intern, Nicole Israel Mayer, and it is of Lake Chilwa, Malawi, from the last time that lake was completely dried up, and it is the site of an LDCF project. And below, of course, is the iconic picture from this year's climate COP of Tuvalu. Next, please. We are working on nature-based solutions, natural capital approaches in particular. And as I had promised, we are thinking about how to embed natural capital into GEF to enhance valuation of ecosystem services. The world has embraced valuing carbon now. We need to value the services nature provides too. And natural capital approaches can include really formal natural capital accounting following the UN system of environmental and economic accounting, as well as less comprehensive natural capital assessments of ecosystem stocks and flows. And, you know, I would remind you that GEF 7 programming had some 8 paragraphs devoted to NCA, but only a handful of projects each year attempt it, and uptake appears to be quite low. There is really the perception that natural capital accounting takes a long time and they're very difficult to undertake and use. Now, as you also know, GEF 8 programming directions say that natural capital accounting will be used in biodiversity mainstreaming, and the Blue and Green Islands IP will encourage SIDS to use natural capital approaches, and the Global Coordinating Function will provide technical support. I think natural capital approaches could be thought about in other IPs too. So we've looked at projects in GEF 6 and 7 that have used natural capital approaches. 12, let's see, I think there were 21 that we kept in all. 9 used the more formal natural capital accounting and 12 used more of the assessment process. And basically we found that NCA has been used mainly at the subnational or regional level, not the whole economy level. And for particular sectors such as tourism, fisheries, agriculture, and water, although we do see NCAs used in land use planning, land degradation neutrality, and biodiversity mainstreaming. But many of these exercises, as the OECD reports, appear to be seen as one time and are not mainstreamed. So what next? Staff is working with the Stanford Natural Capital Project. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean actually to go next. The staff is working with the Stanford Natural Capital Project on a short-term research project that is going to look at where and why a natural capital approach has worked best or not, and the barriers to uptake, and how we could then embed natural capital assessment into GEF projects. Stanford has done some 100 trainings, including with several of our GEF agencies, and we hope to learn from them. And longer term, I'm working with our own National Academy of Sciences and the US and the Royal Society in London to convene a forum next June that will invite the science, the practitioner, and the business worlds to compare best practices and identify needs so we can accelerate the valuation of ecosystem services and nature-based solutions. We are also thinking about longer-term ideas to accelerate this. My stretch goal might be, why couldn't we have 50 GEF recipient countries fully able to apply natural capital approaches by the end of GEF 8? Just to put that out there. Now we can go to next. This is actually, the next slide here is actually a botanical interlude. This is a wonder of nature inserted for the GEF CEO, rediscovered by one of our mutual friends at Rio Avis. This is Genoma epetiolata, the stained glass palm thought to be extinct. And it is not a beautiful, rare, and resilient wonder of nature. We need some good news, and this is a good news story. Okay, on back to work, next slide, or back to the work program. STAP screened a total, you can do the next one, Nico. Staff screened a total of 29 projects, 26 from the trust fund, 3 LDCF projects, and our ratings were 8 concur and 21 minors. Overall, I'm really happy to say there were a number of good projects which exemplified many of those enabling elements of good project design I just presented. Many PIFs try to have a theory of change, exhibit systems thinking, good stakeholder engagement, root causes, barriers, and baselines. Although sometimes this information could be presented more concisely. Some of these PIFs are more than 200 pages long. Many projects, though, now do include a theory of change, and some are following staff's advice on the theory of change, including providing narrative text and graphical representations that describe the pathways. 2 examples quickly would be UNIDO's Improving Thermal Energy Efficiency in India, and UNEP's Rapid Decarbonization of the Energy Sector in St. Kitts and Nevis. But, you know, the glass is half full. Some theories of change are simplistic and only talk about the project components and the outcomes without explaining that miracle in the middle that has to happen. On climate risks, projects do usually identify the potential impact of climate change on achieving their outcomes, but many don't actually include a real climate risk screen. A good example, though, is UNDP's Securing Climate Resilience, Sustainable Land Management, and Progress Towards Land Degradation Neutrality in Micronesia. And actually the photo on this slide is the Yila Mountain in Micronesia. And other projects say, we know there's an issue, and we'll develop the climate screen by PPG stage. So staff sincerely hopes that's true. Again, a lot of progress, but still more work to do. Let's see, next slide, please. And let me just point out 3 overall outstanding projects from this round of screening. FAO's strategies, technologies, and social solutions to manage bycatch in tropical large marine ecosystem fisheries. This represents a really robust theory of change. It's well thought out, and it directly responds to identified barriers to both economic and social viability of the fisheries sector. The Farm Initiative, Financing Agrochemical Reduction and Management, led by UNEP and ADB, builds on previous GEF investments to reduce the use of agrochemicals worldwide. And I think this might be the first time that the issue of plastics in agriculture is being addressed, as well as the associated impacts on soil and food quality. And finally, towards land degradation neutrality for improved equity, sustainability, and resilience by FAO. They've already done baseline studies and targeted landscapes, outlined policy options and causal links, and co-benefits are articulated. So this might be a really interesting one to measure and report on co-benefits that we should follow. Next, STAP's future work program, and you can go to the next. Finally, I just want to say a few words about our forthcoming work. We hope we will be wise, as owls are alleged to be. This is the endangered Blakiston's fish owl, the largest owl found in temperate Asia. STAP will continue to work with GEF on co-benefits. We see a distinction between global environmental benefits, which are essential to our GEF projects, and additional co-benefits such as local air and water quality, health, livelihoods, youth, indigenous knowledge. But these unmeasured incidental benefits can add to the luster of and the rate of return for GEF investments. We're planning, we think, 3 workshops in the next season on blue economy scenario planning, not just climate scenarios, but think about a range of future demographic and risk profiles, and possibly with GEF SEC metrics for transformational change. I promised a report on NatCap approaches by council, and that will be followed by the National Academies and Royal Society convenings and other issues we're thinking about. As you heard yesterday, what should be GEF's risk appetite? How to advance innovation? How do we track leakage, policy coherence? And of course, we'll present our mandated report to the GEF Assembly. And so next and last, to wrap up, researchers, if you would, yeah, researchers from NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, were observing the Retriever seamount, which is 320 kilometers from New York City, using a remotely operated vehicle, when they spotted what your young children would see as SpongeBob SquarePants and Patrick Star, the main characters from Nickelodeon's children cartoon, SpongeBob SquarePants. That's a show actually created by a marine biologist. And if your children know it, you'll spot a striking resemblance of this Hertwiggia sponge and the Chondraster starfish to that iconic duo. So we don't know if this is life imitating art or art imitating life, but it's another wonder of nature to ponder and perhaps share with your children. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rosina, for highlighting new science and presenting your ongoing and future work in such an excellent way. Now, I would like to invite the members of the council to pose questions and comments. And I'll leave it to the Secretary of the Council to announce the list of speakers. William, please.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, William and Rosina. Thank you so much for your very good presentation. I was very happy how you designed your presentation, because you presented to us the latest climate scenarios based on the aspirations and commitments from countries on their NDCs and their decarbonization plans. And yes, the science tells us that we need to reduce 45% of emission by 2030. Unfortunately, the scientific reports tell us that we may be increasing up to 17% emissions by 2030. So one thing is their aspiration, and another thing is what is happening at the ground level, and recognizing the role that the GEF has had for 30 years. GEF 8 and GEF 9 will be critical in the future of people and the planet because of these mere facts. That is why it is extremely important to be able to really understand what are those very strategic investments that GEF should be doing in GEF 8 and GEF 9. As a matter of fact, we understand that GEF 8 and GEF 9 should go together as we continue to understand how we contribute into the system change. And I'm so glad that staff will be working on policy coherence, because the only way that we can revert that tendency, which is by 2030 have 17% more emission than today, and be on track on reducing emissions, we need to help countries align all public and private investment with the Paris Agreement. Your help on assisting us on helping the countries to do this is extremely important. Policy coherence and the alignment of public and private investment with the Paris Agreement is extremely important, and there is not many good stories all around. So I'm so happy that you were able to present where we are. Nevertheless, I think that we never had such a strong alignment within the scientific recommendations and ways forward with the political commitments as we have now. And just Glasgow was great. Still, with the 1.5 degree is on life support, and we need to really understand what are the very strategic investment that the GEF should be doing with the countries. Thank you, Rosina.
Thank you very much. Tom, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. Thank you so much, Rosina and staff colleagues. As always, relevant work and advice on circular economy, plastics, and oceans, and really look forward to the future work on co-benefits, blue economy, and natural capital approaches, as well as other very practical advice, not only to the GEF, but also to the partnership. And believe it or not, to a lot of Canadians who are actually working and investing billions in these areas. As Canada, as an ocean region, we are doing a blue strategy, and we really, really look forward to all of the practical advice that the staff can provide. And as Carlos Manuel said, after Glasgow, the 1.5 is sort of like still available, but we need to truly lean in. And I know that you were jokingly saying, why not 50 by the end of GEF 8 in terms of countries adopting natural capital approaches? But I took those little remarks very seriously. And I hope that our colleagues and Carlos Manuel, who really loves his Costa Rica and the wonders of Costa Rica, also take that seriously, because it is not business as usual. We need to lean in and figure out how to introduce transformative change. So thank you so much, Rosina. And I had to take the floor, otherwise my environmental specialists who actually work with me, they would fire me when I go back into the office in 2022. So thank you again.
Thank you very much. Ben, you have the floor.
Many thanks, William, and also many thanks to Rosina and her staff team on, as always, a very inspiring presentation and report, including, of course, flagging the important considerations for the GEF 8 programming, which I think was echoed by Carlos Manuel as well. We're grateful for the work to continue to produce guidance on project development to ensure that they are effective. And we hope that partners will consider these in detail, as well as move forward to ensure we maximize the benefits for the environment and also the poorest. The STAT report makes clear that the efficient use of funding requires taking an integrated approach, using tools such as systems thinking and theory of change to achieve better integrated outcomes. And we noted the need to track co-benefits to help mainstream integrated approaches across GEF programming, and also your future work on that as well. The report makes important points on the need for GEF projects to design for multiple future scenarios. It'd be useful to know if STAP can provide further details on how the GEF can better embed this approach into program development and implementation. We agree with you and STAP on the value of natural capital accounting or approaches, has in mainstreaming biodiversity and supporting better decision making. And we welcome your work on this and your future work on this. We welcome again STAP's work on the circular economy and the advisory report, and we agree this agenda is key for multiple environmental and developmental challenges. And finally, welcome the STAP's focus on the blue economy and the effort to produce advisory documents, noting that blue economy and ocean are important agendas, and clearer guidance on how to effectively support the blue economy development is in an integrated manner with long-lasting impacts will be very valuable. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. Renato, you have the floor.
Thank you, William, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'd just like to thank Rosina for the excellent presentation, very, very, very informative and very interesting. And on behalf of our constituency of Brazil, Colombia, and Ecuador, I would like to welcome this report and from staff and commend the recommendations of it. And especially the South-South cooperation for knowledge exchange, and particularly the empowerment of the recommendation to empower the operational focal points to act as catalyzer on this process. Just to briefly comment that in our region, we have a good example of South-South cooperation and technical assistance with the second phase, the first and the second phase of the Amazon Sustainable Landscape Program. This program has the important component of knowledge sharing and capacity building. They're helping to the implementation of actions under local and regional initiatives in the Amazon, including the Leticia Pact, and they coordinated its actions among regional and national stakeholders. So perhaps the example of South-South cooperation knowledge exchange developed under the Amazon Landscape Sustainable Landscape Program could be replicated to other initiatives under the GEF, including but not limited to the strengthening of the role and capacity of the operational focal points. Thank you, William. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Rob, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. Good morning, Rosina. Thank you so much for your presentation. For me, the staff presentations are always the highlight of the council meetings, and that was true today too. So thank you very much. We always really appreciate the thoughtful approach the staff takes to ensuring that GEF interventions are grounded in sound science, and welcome these 3 documents. We especially today would like to comment on the how to design a circular economy project advisory document. As we said at the last council meeting, as circularity continues to mature from academic concept to policy and implementation, we think the GEF can play an important role to ensure that clear links are made between enhanced circularity of resource flows and existing MEA obligations. This document makes a key step in that direction by helping operationalize circular approaches. We appreciate the staff's compendium of evidence that circular economy interventions can help mitigate climate emissions through interventions that reduce resource flows in the food and fiber systems, as well as renewable energy transport, textiles, and construction. We believe the staff and the GEF could become important leaders in developing ways to track and report the co-benefits of circularity, particularly of climate, and we look forward to seeing how this continues to develop. With the knowledge management paper, we would welcome the staff's involvement in developing a knowledge management platform for GEF aid that can help share best practices and lessons learned across GEF programming in a user-friendly manner. And finally, we appreciate the work on looking at enabling elements for durable benefits. The quality of GEF programming has improved over these past 30 years, and it is work like this that will continue to improve the long-term impacts of these projects. So again, thank you very much for your presentation, and really appreciate all of the work that you're doing. Thanks much. Over.
Thank you, Rob. Liesl, you have the floor.
Hi. From our constituency, we would very much like to thank the chairperson of the staff for the statement and the written report, and very, very grateful for today's presentation. Always very stimulating and interesting. Thank you. Input from staff is important for guiding council decisions, and we have to say we find it unfortunate that the staff report was published at a very late stage before this council meeting. We note in the staff's report on enabling elements for good project design that pursuing integrated outcomes is one of the enabling elements to maximize enduring global environmental benefits from GEF investments. This is a positive finding given the increased integrated direction suggested for GEF 8. We look forward to the criteria which the staff is developing for GEF investments in the area of blue economy. We hope that these criteria will come early enough to influence GEF investments under its 8th period, and we hope that they will help providing a niche for the GEF in the work of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy. With regards to your work on adaptation, we'd like to know, will this also help in terms of reporting on adaptation as a co-benefit of GEF's work beyond LDCF projects? And finally, understanding that there was supposed to be other updates for climate screening of GEF projects last year, could you provide us a status on this work? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liesl. Gerard, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. Let me first of all start by saying good morning, good afternoon to everyone. And I would like to thank also the staff management for this very comprehensive report and the excellent presentation, especially on the work done by Rosina. Thank you very much. We fully support the timely recommendations made by the staff to the functioning of GEF. We are especially appreciative of staff's ongoing works as regard LDCF, SCCF strategy alongside GEF policy directions in order to promote transformational change. Briefly, some aspects that we'd like to comment on. To start with, it would be useful to know the extent to which the recommendations made by staff is currently making its way into GEF priorities and strategies. What is the status of past recommendation made by staff? Have these been incorporated and operationalized in GEF strategies and agencies, projects, concepts? Further, is there a systematic and monitoring assessment mechanism in place to this effect? As regards the project review and screening mandate of the staff, it is very crucial to have concrete feedbacks on the quality of advice provided by the panel in order to obtain a better understanding of the adequacy, soundness, and value-added impact of the scientific and technical advice on the GEF overall portfolio. Secondly, the global and climate change challenges and the broad path to address these challenges are well appreciated, as presented by Rosina. And we know that in the staff report, emphasis is being made on the whole knowledge architecture, management, promotion, and dissemination that need to be exploited and translated in good practice for paradigm shifting impacts. We would like to underscore that this is an important dimension for developing countries, LDCs, and SIDS, and it calls for increased and focalized collaboration with the scientific communities of these priority country groups. Finally, in the light of a rapidly changing global context, the GEF portfolio projects are increasingly going for greater inclusion of social science components. On this note, the staff secretariat could look into working with GEF Secretariat and the IEO, Independent Evaluation Office, in the development of context-appropriate indicators to measure impacts at portfolio levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much. René, you have the floor. You are muted, René.
Thank you, co-chair. René is absent today, so as the focal point, I will act in his place. We thank the STAP and Rosina for her work and its report. For us, STAP is an essential component of the GEF machinery. Given the variety of issues that STAP deals with, let me just single out two of them for a specific comment: COVID-19 and adaptation. When discussing the work program, which is later in the agenda, we will learn that each proposal now includes a COVID risk assessment with many adaptive practices mainstreamed in project preparation. We are therefore surprised that the report of the STAP chair does not mention COVID-19 or the pandemic, nor did the STAP report to the previous 60th Council mention the pandemic. It seems we only have the COVID white paper that was presented at the 59th GEF Council, now a year ago, and that paper was drafted with the aim of looking more broadly and include issues that might rise in priority and be considered in the GEF 8 programming strategy. The white paper was not intended to be a guide for dealing with COVID in project preparation. So how did the 26 projects prepared for the current work program assess and mainstream the COVID risks? On the basis of what advice, which guidelines? Does the GEF high-level task force on COVID-19 still exist? Is the STAP part of this task force? If so, what tasks does the task force currently work on? We think, Mr. Chair, that COVID is here to stay for the coming years, and certainly, and unfortunately, in some of the countries eligible for GEF support. Do all the implementing agencies have their own guidelines on how to mainstream COVID considerations in project design and formulation? Could you elaborate on the current role of STAP in all GEF processes dealing with COVID? And then, co-chair, there's climate adaptation. We are very pleased to hear that STAP works on helping to clarify which adaptation projects are appropriate for LDCF funding and ensure that LDCF interventions meet an agreed adaptation objective, while at the same time achieving effective adaptation outcomes. This, we realize, is by no means easy. There is a fairly broad gray area between regular development cooperation activities and biodiversity activities on the one hand, and certain climate adaptation activities on the other hand, and projects should have enough climate rationale for their expenditures to classify as climate relevant. I think that from many sides, STAP's effort to define the threshold or the markers between climate relevance and just developmental relevance will be closely watched by many and may serve as an input for other fora, such as the GCF, where a debate on climate rationale is currently ongoing. So we support these efforts of STAP, and we are very eager to see STAP's advice on this at the next council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Karin, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. First, I'd like to thank the STEP team and the STAP team and Rosina for her excellent presentation. Very, very interesting. And also to thank the STAP for its work since the last council meeting. And there are many comments made by others that I could support as well on different aspects to the report. But we want to note with appreciation, especially the work conducted with respect to the circular economy approach, which we believe is vital for supporting recipient countries' work on SDG on ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns. A non-toxic circular economy is a prerequisite for sustainable development and poverty reduction. So we want to single out that this time, but we also appreciate other things obviously reported and presented today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brenda, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. I will speak in Spanish. Muy buen día, tarde y noche a todos. Desde nuestra circunscripción constituida por Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, México, Nicaragua, Panamá y Venezuela, agradecemos el reporte presentado por el STAP y los felicitamos por el trabajo desarrollado hasta ahora y en particular por esta excelente y muy inspiradora presentación. Muchas gracias, Rosina. Consideramos relevantes varios de los puntos que se han presentado, entre ellos la importancia de promover la cooperación sur-sur y el intercambio de conocimientos con el objetivo de aumentar la innovación y la cooperación para tener resultados duraderos. Promover la eficiencia y la eficacia de los proyectos GEF es fundamental para lograr el impacto que como sociedad requerimos. Y para lograrlo es de suma importancia lograr la interacción de todos los actores, incluidas las instituciones financieras y los sectores público y privado. México, como parte del panel de alto nivel para una economía oceánica sostenible, está comprometido con implementar acciones orientadas a una economía oceánica sostenible. Y de hecho ya estamos trabajando con el Banco Mundial en el Fondo ProBlue para desarrollar una estrategia orientada a fortalecer estas acciones. En este sentido, invitamos a todos los países a unirse a la recuperación de la economía azul. Finalmente, esperamos para futuras reuniones tener un poco más de detalle sobre los programas integrados propuestos para la octava reposición, cuestiones sobre su operabilidad y beneficios, así como la importancia de buscar una distribución de estos programas entre países que son de suma importancia para nosotros. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Brenda. Miguel, tienes la palabra.
Gracias, William. Como siempre, nuestra circunscripción agradece la excelente, muy interesante y también motivadora presentación de Rosina y todo el trabajo del equipo del STAP. Al igual que mi colega Brasil, quisiera destacar y apoyar la propuesta de iniciar actividades de capacitación en diversos temas a los puntos focales operativos, lo cual será una herramienta de mucha utilidad para mejorar, robustecer la formulación de los proyectos y al mismo tiempo fortalecer la cooperación entre los puntos focales y la cooperación sur-sur. Muchas gracias.
Sorry. We tried to cut. Was that a problem, Mette?
Yeah, I think, you know, the English interpretation are here. That's the same time as the Spanish intervention. So I think you need to fix that before he continues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think Miguel has finished his intervention in any case. So we'll see what we can do from the technical side. Thank you, Mette. Richard, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. Thank you very much to the STAP team and Rosina for, as always, a fantastic and informative presentation. Just a couple of questions and comments. First of all, very much appreciate the focus on a couple of elements, blue economy and circular economy. Just in relation to the circular economy, I was wondering the extent to which there's been consideration of the linkages to the progress towards establishment of a new international agreement on marine pollution and how the work of the STAP is potentially feeding into that. And on blue economy, again, reinforce the linkages to the high-level panel on sustainable ocean economy, but also be interested in the work you've been doing on coastal marine ecosystems, in particular blue economy, blue carbon work, noting that Australia's very interested in blue carbon and oceans more generally, so that's why we're very supportive of the focus on the blue economy elements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. That ends the list of speakers. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your questions and comments. I will soon give the word to Rosina to respond, but I will also ask the Secretariat to be prepared to respond to the two questions from Gerard and the Netherlands after Rosina has commented. Rosina, please.
Thank you very much for these wonderful, amazing, and difficult questions. Let me start by saying, yes, we can say 1.5 is on life support, but in terms of the things that we think GEF can best further, I think the continued focus on nature-based solutions, which, as you see, can deliver 30% of what we need this decade, very important. Valuing those nature-based solutions and ecosystem services, very important. I think looking at scenarios of what could work and what might not work. For example, those marine protected areas in the ocean that I showed you, will they persist? These are all important aspects that are very central to our work. Similarly, the comments on involving rapid mitigation and having public-private partnerships is extremely important and relevant to the GEF, and advancing the NGI is really tricky. You know, it's riskier, there's longer chains of reasoning, but they offer so much transformational change. And so in that envelope of activities, plus more circular economy approaches, I think those are some of the sweet spots for GEF to focus on. I really welcome the comments on South-South knowledge exchange and training that we got from Brazil and Mexico and others, the support for natural capital accounting from Canada, Mauritius, and others, the support for doing more hard thinking on blue economy, working with the countries that are thinking very hard about this, including Canada, the UK, and Denmark. And on that issue, to Australia's last question, we did focus early on the land-based sources of marine pollution as an early input to the ongoing IP that's proposed, and coastal and blue carbon will be a part of the longer thinking and activity that we're undertaking. One point that, well, several of you raised the issue of how important it is to capture co-benefits, and the UK raised the issue of, you know, embedding scenarios is important. And to us, as I said ever so briefly, it's not just scenarios of climate risk screening, but it is understanding, since 40% of our GEF funding is in pre or post-conflict countries, what all could go wrong. And I think that feeds into the comment from the Netherlands. Yes, most PIFs usually have sections discussing COVID and how they are going to cope with it. But when STAP is thinking about scenarios, it means thinking about all these kinds of surprises, ranging, from war to changes in demography to climate change to pandemics. And how can GEF think about that, anticipate that, and create projects that will be more robust to these changes that at least we have considered going forward. So I think that's a very important point. On the South-South Knowledge Exchange, I should have mentioned, yes, the Sustainable Landscape Program is indeed something that we want to look at more closely as a model. On KM, which I think was coming up most prominently in the US comments, we have been producing reports on KM for at least a decade, and we very much want to help with the platform, and we have at least 2 panel members who are deeply vested in helping GEFSEC develop this. So yes, we will be involved in that as much as possible. Thanks for the support on circular economy. It is not as prominent yet as, of course, we would like. Another glass half empty, half full. We're excited to be seeing these new projects. Yes, indeed, we want more, and we encourage the countries to think about how these circular economy principles can be embedded more firmly. The adaptation development question. Of course, our adaptation projects funded under the LDCF or SECF have to have an adaptation focus and an adaptation reason to exist. And that is what we are trying to understand, as well as to understand what aspects of adaptation are they actually advancing. And I think that this issue of development and adaptation, of course, are closely interlinked, but we do need to understand the global environmental benefits in each of the focal areas. But as all of you have said, increasingly to start to aggregate these across, because there's not enough time to tackle these problems one by one. I think I was also asked how well our advice is being taken. I guess, this is another, I think this was Mauritius. I think it's another glass half empty, half full. I would say theory of change. We have really managed to embed that. In fact, even the replenishment documents have an overall theory of change. And climate risk screening is appearing to be done well, I would argue, in about 1/3 of the projects. Social science, behavioral change, absolutely essential. That's, often that missing miracle in the middle that I mentioned a couple times, from, okay, here's what we're going to do, and here's where we're going to end up. And somehow it all happens. We have had workshops on behavioral change, and we are thinking that in the workshop that we're proposing to do with GEFSEC on transformational change, that behavioral change and social science will need to be firmly embedded in that discussion as well. So I realize the time is short. I think I endeavored to at least address most of the questions. Whether I answered them all or not is another question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosina. No, I just wanted to ask the Secretariat if you have any responses to the question posed by Mauritius and the Netherlands. And if you take the floor, please be brief in your response, because it's time also to invite our guest for the next agenda item.
Thanks, Mette. I will comment first on the question from the Netherlands on the COVID risk assessment and the task force. Actually, the GEF task force ended its work with the production of the white paper that was posted as an information document to the council. But out of that work, several products came out of it. Perhaps the most significant of them would be the framework that we have been using for the development of the GEF-8 strategy, based on this revised One Health approach and the Healthy Planet, Healthy People framework that provides a very important space for the GEF to be even more active in this question of disease prevention, and also on the blue and green recovery going forward. As importantly, they also gave rise to a guidance note that was developed between the GEF Secretariat and agencies and has been in use since last year, since August of last year. The guidance is used systematically now by the agencies in the project design and also in the review. And all the clearances that we provide to projects at the CEO endorsement stage also include COVID considerations and assessments. And each one of the agencies, of course, have also internal processes to deal with this. And also the work program cover note now includes COVID-19 screens for every project. So this work has been quite relevant, and it was done. And I would like to thank both the agencies and also the experts and staff who participated very actively in the work of the task force and the aftermath of that work. The question about how it's being incorporated, I think Rosina already responded to Mauritius' question, so I want to take more time on this. I would just like to address one point, another question I was asked in terms of how we're tracking climate relevant financing. Actually, we've been doing this systematically now and have been reported on climate related financing using the markers, the OECD markers. And you can find that in every scorecard that we presented. And finally, the question of blue economy, I think, was raised by at least 3 council members. Even though this issue of circular economy, circular economy came to us kind of late in the GEF 7 cycle, it has grown in importance and in recognition in our portfolio. Particularly with circular economy on plastics and electronics and textile investments. Now we have a portfolio of $62 million in GEF 7 that has attracted some 400 million co-financing. And the co-benefits on greenhouse gas emission reductions are being tracked, and that represents some 22 million metric tons of CO2, which is estimated to be mitigated by the GEF 7 circular economy projects. We plan to do, of course, much more in GEF 8 as it's presented in the current programming directions for the next cycle. Over to you, Mette. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Gustavo. We do not have a decision on this agenda point, so I just want to thank Rosina and her team very much. Thank you so much, Rosina, on behalf of the Council. We will now move to the next agenda item, the relations with conventions and other international institutions. This agenda item will have 3 sections. First, we will have presentations by the executive secretaries of the conventions that the GEF serves. And in that regard, I am pleased to welcome to our meeting Mr. Ibrahim Touaw, Executive Secretary of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, Mrs. Elizabeth Marema, Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, Mr. Wolf Payet, Executive Secretary for the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, and Mrs. Monika Stankiewicz, Executive Secretary of the Minamata Convention. On the second part of this session, we will have an update of the UNFCCC COP26 outcome. And in that regard, I'd like to welcome Mr. Uvais Saramad, Deputy Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC. The third part of the session will be the consideration of the report on the relation with the convention. So now we are going to the first part of this session, and each of the executive secretaries has been requested to update the Council on the conference of the parties that have taken place since July 2021 and other key developments. And then I will invite Mr. Ibrahim Touaw from the UNCCD to address the Council. Ibrahim, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mette. Good afternoon, good morning to all. Dear Council members, ladies and gentlemen. I'm grateful for this opportunity to brief the Council again. The Council meets at a time when the world is grappling with the increasing challenges in the path of sustainable development. You are really meeting this time around when land restoration is becoming more relevant by the day. I see the beginning of a large-scale land restoration movement across the world. When world leaders speak of trillions of trees to be planted, we should translate these into hectares of land being restored. Restoring degraded lands, as you know, generates revenues for poor population. Land restoration also brings more food to the hungry and to the markets. It's restoring ecosystems and biodiversity. When they say planting trees, we should hear enhancing resilience to climate change, or to the climate crisis rather, while sequestering large quantities of carbon from the atmosphere and bringing carbon back to where it belongs, that is to the soil. Just last month at the UNFCCC COP26 in Glasgow, more than 140 countries agreed on a common declaration, namely the Glasgow Declaration, Leaders' Declaration on Forests and Land Use. Leaders committed to working together to reverse forest loss and land degradation by 2030. We now need to move rapidly from summit declarations to real implementation on the ground. Another positive outcome of Glasgow was the Bezos Earth pledge of $1 billion for land restoration in Africa, especially for the implementation of the Great Green Wall of the Sahel. The pledges to the Great Green Wall of the Sahel are now totaling more than $19 billion. This Africa-led land restoration initiative, which you are familiar with, would not be possible without the incubation of the GEF. The Great Green Wall is one of the concrete examples of a program which, from its early stages, benefited from the support of the GEF. When only few believed on the Great Green Wall, the GEF saw the potential of a glass half full, method to paraphrase half full or half empty. Today, banks and other financial institutions are investing on the Great Green Wall. This is a concrete demonstration that investing in nature can be a positive and profitable business, even in the Sahel, one of the harshest conditions on Earth. UNCCD is working closely with all partners and the 11 countries of the Great Green Wall to develop mechanisms that allow better access to the existing funds to help address land restoration, drought, renewable energies, youth, and women's employment across the Sahel region. I would like to express our gratitude once again to you as members of the Council and to the GEF Secretariat for your trust and for your support. Today, we are happy to see similar initiatives being developed in other parts of the world. Again, a concrete case of what a successful demonstration program can do, namely to serve as an example and to emulate. In that respect, the Middle East Green Initiative, announced in March 2021, was launched in Riyadh last month. It aims, among others, to restore 200 million hectares across the greater Middle East. In parallel, Saudi Arabia launched its own national green initiative, which aims at restoring 40 million hectares of degraded land. Similar initiatives are already in place in India, in Pakistan, in China. We are pleased to see other countries developing similar programs, including Mongolia, the countries of the Dry Corridor in Latin America, as well as countries of Southern Africa under the SADC umbrella. In addition, Just 2 weeks ago, I signed in Riyadh an agreement with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to set up the Secretariat of the G20 Global Initiative on Land Degradation and Enhancing Conservation of Terrestrial Habitat. That is the initiative, as you know, which was launched at the G20 leaders under the Saudi G20 presidency in November 2020. Under this initiative, the G20 leaders aim to prevent, halt, and reverse land degradation across the world through private sector engagement, civil society empowerment, knowledge sharing, and development. The ambition here is to achieve a 50% reduction in degraded land by 2040. This will support other existing initiatives, adding momentum to the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Ladies and gentlemen, dear Council members, we at the UNCCD are now focusing on our upcoming COP15, which will be held in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, 2nd and 3rd weeks of May 2022. Two topics are likely to be discussed by parties, amongst others. First, parties will review the report of the Intergovernmental Working Group on Drought, which was set up by the previous COP in New Delhi. Unfortunately, droughts are hitting every year more countries, more communities, more economies, and more ecosystems. As we speak, millions of people are deprived from food and basic needs in Eastern Africa and in Madagascar. It is really heartbreaking to see people starving, large mammals dying literally in the deserts, and millions of hectares of forest burning all over the world. Secondly, large-scale restoration, land restoration, is likely to come up as a big topic at the next COP. The world seems to be finally waking up to the importance of nature-based solutions. This movement is now unstoppable. The smartest private investors have gotten the message. It is a critical moment for the GEF as we have on site the early results of our 30 years of investments in nature. 30 years of demonstration, research, and science. I saw Rosina just before. Thank you for the great work that you and your team are doing. The moment has now come to move to large scale. In my recent trip to Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, government authorities expressed their interest in developing what they call a legacy program. As proud hosts to UNCCD COP15 and a country whose economy is largely dependent on agriculture, they want to invest on their best asset, namely land. Hence, boosting long-term environmental sustainability across major value chains. Investing in large-scale sustainable management of land and soils in Côte d'Ivoire is investing in the country's best assets, its natural capital. This will help protect and restore forests and lands and improving communities' resilience to climate change. It's an opportunity for the UNCCD and for the GEF, as well as for other partners, to work together to support this program, which will help restore land and ensure sustainable development. This is the large-scale land management we are inviting GEF partners to consider when moving ahead with the 8th replenishment of the facility. Keeping in view the emerging challenges that today's world is facing, we hope that the replenishment of GEF 8 will find innovative and creative ways to address these challenges. UNCCD will continue working with its parties to set and update their voluntary land degradation neutrality targets and to develop projects to meet these targets. Most parties have developed their national drought plans with UNCCD's assistance. They are looking for support to implement these plans. Drought is an increasing threat to the unpredictable changes in the world's environment, and there's a dire need of financing this to enhance resilience and implement measures to combat effects of drought. So allow me to close reminding us of two issues that come high in the world's attention: drought management and mitigating the impact of drought. Second, sustainable land management, large-scale restoration. These, ladies and gentlemen, are important issues that also concern climate change, biodiversity, food, and human well-being. They are at the heart of what GEF is all about and what GEF 8 should be focusing on. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim, for your intervention. We will now hear also from the other executive secretaries before we ask the council to come with any comments on the questions. Thank you. Now I will invite the executive secretary of the CBD, Mrs. Elizabeth Maruma Marema, to address the council. Please, Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair Mete. And thanks also to the GEF CEO, Carlos Manuel Rogre. And thank you all for inviting me to address this meeting of the Council of the Global Environmental Facility on the outcomes of our recent meetings of the Convention on Biological Diversity, including the first part of the UN Biodiversity Conference, expectation for the upcoming meetings, as well as the essential role that the GEF 8 will play to support countries in the implementation of the objectives of the convention as well as its protocols. Distinguished members of the Council, when I addressed the Council meeting in June, the Convention on Biological Diversity had just then completed the first parts of the mandated meetings of its subsidiary bodies, which were held online and adjourned until when the parties were able to reconvene in person to finalize their negotiations and recommendations for the Conference of the Parties. Since then, we convened the online segment of the third meeting of the open-ended working group on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which adjourned early on 3rd September, as well as the first part of the Conference of the Parties held in October in Kunming, China. The first part of the Conference of the Parties was convened to address urgent issues, including the adoption of the interim budget for 2022 for the work to be able to continue. But also very importantly, the first part helped to build political momentum for the adoption of the ambitious and achievable post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. While its substantive work was conducted online, it also had a significant in-person presence. And I would like to commend the government of China that now serves as the president of the Conference of the Parties for its leadership in this historic meeting and towards the resumption of the conference that will be held fully in person in Kunming later next year. The conference comprised the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, the 10th meeting of the Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Biosafety Protocol, and the 4th meeting of the Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Access and Benefit Sharing Protocol, as well as the high-level segment. I was pleased to join some 3,000 participants physically in Kunming and nearly 2,500 participants, delegates connected to the conference online. The high-level segment featured a leaders summit as well as the ministerial segment. The leaders summit was attended by our UN Secretary General together with 9 heads of state and government representing the past, present, and future presidencies of the Conference of the Parties to the Convention, the presidency of the 26th Conference of the Parties to the Climate Change, and the regional groups, including the small island developing states and landlocked countries. The ministerial segment was organized under the theme of the conference, Ecological Civilization, Building a Shared Future for All on All Life on Earth. And it heard interventions from 99 ministers and other high-level representatives from 97 countries. I learned too that the number 99 in Chinese is an auspicious one, meaning lasting forever. That is indeed the ultimate purpose of our 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. The high-level segment injected the much needed political momentum and impetus on the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. A multitude of funding commitments were announced, and I would like only to mention few, beginning with the Chinese President Xi Jinping, who announced a 1.5 billion yuan commitment to establish a Kunming Biodiversity Fund. The European Union announced it was going to double its external funding for biodiversity. President Macron of France committed 30% of climate funds to be used for biodiversity. And the government of UK announced that significant part also of its increased climate funding will be directed towards biodiversity. The government of Japan announced a $17 million extension of its Japan Biodiversity Fund, which was established a decade ago. In addition, a Kunming Declaration was adopted by acclamation, representing a strong statement of political will in support of the development of the effective post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. It also outlined key elements for a successful framework, from a whole of government approach in legal and policy reform to a whole of society consideration, including full and effective participation of indigenous peoples and local communities. I would also like to thank the Chief Executive Officer of the Global Environmental Facility, Mr. Carlos, for announcing at the conference the readiness of GEF to support the parties in initial preparatory work that will be essential to enable an immediate implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework upon its adoption. Ladies and gentlemen, what are the expectations moving forward? The second part of the Conference of the Parties is scheduled to take place in Kunming in the middle of next year. Prior to this, an open-ended working group of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, together with a subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technological advice, and the subsidiary body on implementation, will resume their suspended meetings in order to conclude their work. Further elaboration and ultimately the adoption of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework will be a major focus of these meetings. The online meetings, despite the challenges involved, have certainly been successful in advancing the work of the subsidiary bodies in the recommendations that they are required to make to the Conference of the Parties. This includes strategies for capacity building, resource mobilization, and an enhanced framework for monitoring and reviewing progress in implementation. There's a general support for the content and the structure of the draft post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, including its goals and targets. Key proposals for adjustments and differences of opinions have been made clear. This sets us on a strong foundation for the open-ended working group to complete its work when it reconvenes. The Kunming Declaration has certainly provided a solid foundation for continued work on an effective post-2020 global biodiversity framework that contributes to achieving all three objectives of the convention. The aspiration of the heads of state and government clearly pointed out inclusive, just, and sustainable pathways for nature and people that should now permeate the negotiations on the global biodiversity framework. And the ministers were aligned to guide negotiators to deliver on those aspirations. Dear Council members, what do we see as the role of the GEF? An unfortunate impact of the delays caused by the pandemic has been on the timeliness with which the Conference of the Parties will be able to provide its guidance to GEF to inform the strategy and programming direction of the 8th replenishment of the GEF currently being negotiated. Proposals for a 4-year outcome-oriented framework of the program priorities for the 8th replenishment period aligned with the post-2020 global biodiversity framework are to be considered by the Conference of the Parties at the 15th meeting. Our recent postponement of the resumed sessions of the meetings that were scheduled to be held in January have added to the further delay and the challenge. I'm pleased to note, however, that the close collaboration and consultation between the CBD Secretariat and the GEF Secretariat in the process of the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework on one hand, and the draft GEF 8 programming direction and strategy on the other are contributing to an alignment between the two instruments. The biodiversity content of the draft GEF 8 programming direction document are aligned well with the objectives of the convention and its protocols, as well as the draft goals and targets of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, including conservation and restoration, sustainable use and benefit sharing, as well as mobilization of financial, technical, and technological resources. The draft integrated programs are targeted at core drivers of biodiversity loss. I'm there optimistic that with the draft GEF 8 programming direction and the corresponding scale of funding, GEF is well positioned to respond to the expectations of the Conference of the Parties and the urgent priority needs of the recipient countries. Informed by the decisions held at the online meetings, documents for the resumed session of the subsidiary body on implementation will be published in the coming days with proposals for the 4-year framework of the program priorities and assessment of funding necessary and available for the implementation of the convention for the period July 2022 to June 2026. The independent study has developed 3 scenarios to estimate the funding needs, and their results have confirmed that the funding scenarios presented by the GEF at the second meeting of the GEF 8 replenishment are right options moving forward. To conclude, distinguished council members, co-chairs, it is clear that the world is at crossroads, and decisions made by the world governments in our multilateral processes in the coming months will have profound implications for the future of humanity. Fundamental changes are needed. Progress was made at Climate COP26, and we need to build on that at our second part of the Conference of the Parties 15 next year. A strong GEF replenishment will be essential. I therefore look forward to the continued cooperation between our 2 instruments at all levels, including between GEF and the convention counterparts at national level, between the secretariats and between the COP and the Council. Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you so much for your interventions, including the updates. As for Ibrahim, we will now continue with the two other executive secretaries before I invite the council to come with questions and comments. Thank you very much. Now I invite Mr. Rolf Payet, the executive secretary for the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Convention, to address the council. Please, Rolf, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair, Ms. Mete. Thank you very much, Carlos Manuel, the CEO of the GEF, council members, colleagues, and participants. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. I was very much looking forward to see you all face to face, but unfortunately, we are back to somehow, lockdowns again and restrictions. But I'm very happy to have been invited to address you at the 61st GEF Council meeting. My remarks will indeed focus on three main topics, which is the outcomes of the online segment on our triple BRS COPs held in July 2021, the expectations of the upcoming face-to-face segment of our triple BRS COPs, and the role that the GEF will play to support countries, as well as the aid replenishment, which is a very, very important process. As you know, despite the challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it has been a very busy year for the BRS conventions. In fact, in July 2021, over 160 parties to the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention successfully met online and took very important decisions, which gave continuity to our work, but also continuity to the work that we are doing in cooperation with the GEF. The most relevant decision for this GEF Council is the decision to forward two important outcomes to the GEF for its consideration. Given the ongoing negotiations for the aid replenishment, and these two documents are the fifth review of the financial mechanism of the Stockholm Convention, and the second is a report of the full assessment of the funding necessary and available for the implementation of the Stockholm Convention for the period 2022 to 2026. So I look forward to sending you those documents shortly. In a nutshell, the review of the financial mechanism concluded that although the GEF has responded adequately to COP decisions, the resources for POPs, which is persistent organic pollutants, in the GEF have not been commensurate with the evolution of the convention. As a matter of fact, although 18 new chemicals have been listed in the Stockholm Convention, resources for POPs have either remained stable or were lower than before, at times when there were additional resources available for distribution among other focal areas. This is becoming a growing concern in light of the 2025 and 2028 deadlines set out in the convention for addressing PCBs, where significant GEF resources will need to be set aside to deal with this important legacy chemical. At the same time, focus in the GEF 8 and GEF 9 will need to shift to the newly listed POPs, such as PFAS and flame retardants, with their own complexities and their very close links to other focal areas, such as biodiversity, climate change, and of course, the integrated programs. The needs assessment report concluded that US dollars 4.9 billion or $5 billion are needed to protect human health and the environment from persistent organic pollutants, out of which 2.39 billion are needed to address PCBs alone. It is indeed promising that we have received a very strong message from the online segment of COP10 of Stockholm Convention, whereby donors to the GEF Trust Fund have been strongly encouraged to significantly increase the allocation for the convention in GEF 8 to assist recipient country parties in fulfilling their commitments related to PCBs. Our ambition for GEF 8 and indeed GEF 9 must be to find ways to secure the much needed funding to meet the 2025 and 2028 sorry, PCB deadlines, and at the same time safeguard the work of our newly listed chemicals. This requires indeed thinking outside the box as well as innovation, but also exploring and strengthening linkages and engagement with the private sector. Thus, we will need your support as member states, as GEF Council members, as GEF agencies, as well as the implementing and executing agencies of the GEF. I do count on everyone involved to engage with us in this new ambition in the months to come. The expectation for the face-to-face segment of the BRS COPs in June 2022 is that parties will discuss substantive topics, which for matters pertaining to the financial mechanism of the Stockholm Convention will include guidance to the GEF on priorities for GEF 8, substantive matters related to the needs assessment for 2022 to 2026, and the 5th review of the financial mechanism. On the guidance for GEF 8, I recognize that the Stockholm Convention is not the only MEA that, with the related COVID-related delays, will not meet in time to inform the GEF replenishment process. I trust that flexibility will be applied in those difficult times to allow our parties to deal with emerging issues as we also engage in the process of the GEF 8 replenishment. In GEF 8 and indeed in GEF 9, the continued focus of the GEF on integrated approaches and cross-cutting programming is welcome and has the potential to ensure the most effective and efficient use of GEF resources for delivering long-term and more durable global environmental outcomes. Besides integrated approaches, is also an opportunity to further raise the profile of the entire chemicals and waste area. However, I note with concern the fact that most of the integrated programming area has minor contributions to the chemicals and waste focal area. If pollution is one of the main drivers of biodiversity loss, how can we address this serious gap within the 8th replenishment and STAP's work on the theory of change? In simple terms, how can a generation or future generation enjoy the wonderful biodiversity, enjoy restored degraded lands, and even the ozone layer, if those are still loaded with toxic chemicals, known as the silent killer? It has been known that climate change can and does intensify the negative impacts of hazardous chemicals in both biodiversity and in humans as well. And thus, the support for mobilizing more resources to address chemicals and wastes will also address climate change. We therefore need to prioritize the work on all those 3 global issues in the GEF 8 programming directions. For instance, the transfer of technology and the application of best available techniques and best environmental practices in many sectors could contribute both to ensure resource efficiency and minimize the releases of hazardous chemicals into our environment. The separated investment under each of the focal areas is also welcome, as it helps to ensure that priority needs are firmly grounded in country priorities, which are extensively negotiated by parties in the respective MEAs. For instance, GEF 8 ambitions should pay important attention to deadlines for several time-bound obligations under the Stockholm Convention. I've already mentioned the 2025 and 2028 PCB deadlines. The convention will also need to deal with the expiration of specific exemptions for a list of chemicals that are applied to plastics, to vehicles, to aircrafts, to textiles, to firefighting foams, to electronic equipment, among others, and also newly listed pesticides. I have to remain realistic and optimistic that we may not achieve some of these critical milestones with many justifiable reasons. But as I said before in previous occasions, what I would not agree with is a position where I see attempts for us to reduce the allocation that is given to chemicals and waste, to unfairly limit resources to address those health damaging chemicals, and to bury the implementation of phase out in conceptual frameworks and untested methods. The situation is critical, colleagues, and deaths arising from pollution is not abating globally. The GEF, together with donors and implementing agencies, has been in the forefront in addressing those challenges. And I must commend the efforts of all GEF staff and thank donors in that respect. However, our work is not done. I look forward, therefore, to an enhanced replenishment, especially for the chemicals and waste focal area. Once again, thank you for the opportunity for me to address you, and I wish you excellent and open discussions. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for your intervention, and we will soon hear comments and questions from the Council to your intervention. Thank you very much. But before that, I would like to invite Mrs. Monika Stankiewicz, the Executive Secretary of the Minamata Convention, to address the Council. Please, Monika, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Madam Co-Chair, and good day to everyone. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair and CEO Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, and distinguished Council members for welcoming me here today. The Minamata Convention recently held its online meeting of the Conference of the Parties, and I would like to thank Carlos Manuel for participating in our plenary while also attending COP26 in Glasgow. There was a very limited agenda for the online portion of our COP, and among the few very important time-sensitive matters for discussion was the aid replenishment of the GEF Trust Fund. I recently delivered a compilation of the statements by parties on GEF aid to the CEO for use during the replenishment discussions. We also expect intense deliberations on the financial mechanism of the convention at the resumed meeting of the COP, which is planned to take place in person in Indonesia, in Bali, in March next year. Our parties have sent a clear and compelling message to participants in the replenishment. A robust and increased allocation to the Minamata Convention and to the chemicals and waste focal area is vital to support parties to fulfill their legally binding commitments under the convention. Parties recognize that the role that action on mercury can and must play in achieving the interconnected challenges of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, while improving the health of millions of people and addressing the drivers of environmental degradation. The extent of these interconnections and the true cost of mercury pollution remain largely unknown. Mercury has numerous impacts and dependencies upon natural capital and ecosystem services, which are not captured in traditional financial accounting. In order to conserve and enhance ecosystem services globally, the depletion of natural capital due to mercury must be assessed across the economic sectors. It will be so useful to be able to quantify and evaluate the environmental and social cost of mercury emissions and releases in the future. And this is the direction we would like to take. When the true impacts of mercury on Earth's natural capital and ecosystem services are known, countries will be fully equipped to take decisions that create meaningful and sustainable social, environmental, and financial gains. In the meantime, we naturally recognize that our work is not happening in a vacuum, even with limited research results on this interconnection, and we are looking after really real data and quantifying it. But in the meantime, we know we will not realize the potential of collective action, climate change, biodiversity, deforestation, oceans, and fisheries without sound chemicals management playing a strong role, not a parallel role, but an integrated one. As the world gets serious about tackling all these environmental problems, action on mercury must simply be part of the solutions. The full scope of the Minamata Convention is broad, which I highlight again and again to make sure this is fully realized. Our parties need to take measures on trade in mercury, its use in industrial processes, its emissions from coal combustion, non-ferrous metals production, cement production and waste incineration, and in addition to tackling its use in artisanal and small-scale gold mining, its storage and stocks, and its waste management, among others. Providing adequate support to parties is crucial in face of the upcoming implementation deadlines of the Convention. As we are approaching, hopefully, the full drawdown of chemicals and waste resources in GEF 7, this demonstrates the very significant ongoing demand, the great efforts by parties towards implementation, the hard work of the GEF agencies and its full partnership, and the relevance of the projects in achieving global environmental benefits and the Convention obligations. When I learn about the individual projects being implemented through our financial mechanism, it's very welcome and needed reminder that these projects impact lives, that they are not abstract events in the realm of international negotiations. Our parties and project partners have faced head-on many challenges over the last 2 years, using strong stakeholder engagement, gender strategies, and technical and policy innovations. In my remarks to our opening plenary session at COP4, I noted that for the collective efforts to implement the Convention to be effective, it is imperative that the needs of developing countries and countries with economies with transition are considered. Our financial mechanism, of which GEF is the larger of the two parts, is well structured to achieve this and to leverage domestic, bilateral, multilateral, and private sector financing. Working together, we can advance innovative solutions and unlock larger investments and co-benefits. We had a lively side event on the financial mechanism at COP4. Thank you, Carlos Manuel and the GEF Council member Tom Bui for participating in it. And I took away a number of important points from it. One is that we must make the science-based rationale for our work clear and accessible to a wide range of decision makers across ministries and a wide range of stakeholders. The role of our national focal points in this regard is very important. Our first full national reports on the implementation of the Convention are due at the end of this month. We hope and I expect these reports to provide a great deal of new information party needs, ensuring that the GEF investments lead to effective, integrated, and inclusive responses that are well grounded in national initiatives and whole of government approaches. As GEF 7 makes way for GEF 8, we have had 4 years since the entry into force of the Convention to learn and to grow along with you. I fully realize we need to do more to ensure that the positive results and quantified reduction achieved by these investments are more widely known. We will continue to increase the information and knowledge base on country-specific needs by also working closely with GEF Secretariat through its knowledge management initiatives and ensuring that science and data continue to drive our work. I look forward to intensified dialogue with donors and stakeholders as we move forward towards GEF 8 period. The youth forum that was held in conjunction with this council meeting reminds us about many ways we can protect communities and the environment from pollution. And it is so inspiring to see much creativity, energy, and knowledge to be applied to solutions. I look forward to working with all of you in our collective efforts, and I wish you a successful remaining time during this council meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your intervention. Now it is time for council members to be able to pose comments and questions to the executive secretaries of the 4 conventions. And I ask the secretary of the council to announce the list of speakers. William, please.
Thank you. The floor is open to Gabriela from Switzerland. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, William, and thanks to our executive secretaries from the various conventions. It's always greatly appreciated when you come for an exchange with us. We heard very well your strong call for an increased replenishment from all of you, from all different areas, and also the strong call for a stronger integration also from all of you, which is well received. We will work hard to meet these expectations. I don't know if we can, but we will work on it in the context of the replenishment negotiations. I have a specific question to Elizabeth with regards to the postponement of this OEVG meeting now in Geneva due to the pandemic. How do you feel? Will it possibly affect also the timing of the COP? And do you see that there's still sufficient time for negotiations for a successful outcome on the post-2020 framework for biodiversity? We rest assured that we can. So also in light of the replenishment, I'm sure you have seen the programming documents drafts. There's a strong focus on biodiversity and nature-based solution elements, but of course, if it's not possible to agree on a framework this year, at least politicians might ask some questions. So it'd be great to get a response from that. Then a question to Ralph with regards to the current work program. There's a very strong focus on chemicals and waste in this work program that we have on the table right now, especially the farm program. So maybe you can give us some feedback on the perception of the Secretariat with regards to that. And then also to Monica, again, also strong focus on chemicals and waste. Maybe your perception also on this quite large project that we also have from, I think is in China. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Renato from Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, William, and thank you. I'd like to thank Ibrahim, Elizabeth, Rolf, and Monica for their statements. And I am a representative of the constituency of Brazil, Colombia, and Ecuador. And my question actually goes to it's the same. It's also it's a little bit in the same line of what Gabriela has asked. Going to Elizabeth, we are pleased to receive the GEF and the CBD secretaries have agreed to provide fast-track resources for the adaptation and national plans of the new post-2020 framework. However, given the delays and postponement of the scientific and implementation bodies, as well as the third meeting of the open-ended working group on the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, meetings in Geneva. So we'd like to know what options will we have to adjust or to align the GEF 8 directions to the CBD guidelines for next year. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Renato. Ramon from Spain, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm going to intervene in Spanish. Queremos compartir la preocupación de Elizabeth y Gabriela en relación al convenio de diversidad biológica por el retraso de las reuniones presenciales previstas para enero de 2022 en Ginebra, las reuniones de los órganos subsidiarios y del Grupo para la Negociación del Marco Global de Biodiversidad, lo que podría suponer un nuevo retraso en la celebración de la COP 15.2. Esto puede derivar, desde nuestro punto de vista, en que no sea posible adoptar a tiempo la decisión de la COP en la que se identifiquen las necesidades y prioridades para su inclusión en los debates de reposición del GEF 8. Por lo tanto, sería deseable que la Secretaría del GEF siga de cerca y de primera mano los debates preparatorios de la COP 15.2 para tener en cuenta las necesidades que se vayan identificando y nutrir con ellas el proceso de reposición. Nos ha llamado la atención el texto de la decisión en relación con este punto del orden del día, donde el Consejo da la bienvenida al informe y pide que la red del GEF siga trabajando con los países receptores para reflejar las orientaciones y las prioridades nacionales en la programación y sus actividades. En vista de la temática del punto, quizá tendría sentido que, además de dar la bienvenida al informe, se solicitara al GEF que mantenga una relación continua y directa con los convenios para asegurar que pueda responder adecuadamente a las necesidades y prioridades acordadas en los mismos. Si se incluyera algo así, este punto sería una ocasión para poner de manifiesto la preocupación por la situación que se va a dar en esta reposición, por el hecho de que no se podrá contar con la decisión de la COP, del Convenio de Diversidad Biológica, con la antelación suficiente para que forme parte de los debates del proceso de reposición. Y queremos hacer énfasis en que es importante esta coordinación, especialmente en relación al convenio de diversidad biológica, por su importancia y vinculación con el GEF. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Ramón. Tom, you have the floor. From Canada. We lost Tom. Well, Ben, you go ahead and we'll come back to Tom when he comes back online.
I thought it was Marta first.
Oh, okay.
Hi, William. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. Go ahead.
Must be my pandemic brain acting up again. Anyways, thank you so much, executive secretaries to the conventions. As always, a pleasure to hear the updates on what you're doing. And I especially appreciate being invited to the Minamata online event in order to hear what's going on with mercury and the importance of treating it as an integrated issue. On behalf of all of the people at Environment and Climate Change Canada who actually work day in, day out on the various conventions, including the COP26 and the COP15. They really appreciate that all of the conventions, all of the secretaries continue to do incredible work under exceptional circumstances during this pandemic. And we have listened very carefully in terms of the instructions to the GEF in order for us to think through what we can do. As Gabriela from Switzerland said, as part of GEF 8. There are a few things that I sort of like heard that it would be great to play up. One is from Ibrahim of the UNCCD, of GEF being an innovator, an incubator for the Great Green Wall. And this is something that is often lost in the stampede of the day-to-day, that it is often the small money taking incredible bets based on faith that could lead to transformation. So I just wanted to thank Ibrahim for highlighting that fact, and that you're seeing that large-scale land restoration is happening as we speak. On the logic of integration, as our dear Swiss colleague said, including NBS, our staff chair, Rosina, said that more than 30% of the cost-effective tools to address climate change by 2030 can be found in nature-based solutions, and the shift to more sustainable agriculture and land use choices. This was from the 2019 report on Food and Land Use Coalition as well. And so the question that I have for the CBD and others is, how does NBS, how is it being considered in the various conventions so that it can inform our considerations under GEF 8 as your financial mechanism? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ben, you have the floor from the UK.
Yeah, many thanks. Many thanks, William. And also many thanks as well, as I was expressed, of the presentations from the executive secretaries of UNCCD, CBD, BRS, and Minamata, and particularly your comments in terms of looking forward to GEF 8. All of your comments are very well received, so many thanks for those. In our capacity as the UNFCCC COP26 president, we are working closely with the Rio Convention Presidency's secretariats and the GEF on joint activities that promotes integrated approaches to tackling biodiversity loss, climate change, and land degradation. So we particularly note the point that Rolf from BRS and Monica from Minamata also made in terms of recognizing the importance of integrated approaches, so thanks for that. The UK presidency has also placed nature at the heart of COP26, and our priority is to continue to ensure that there's global recognition that the biodiversity and climate change crisis, and noting that they're inextricably linked, and that action on nature is vital for achieving the Paris goals. In light of that, also many thanks for the comments from Ibrahim from UNCCD regarding nature-based solutions. Halting and reversing biodiversity loss will require significant increases in the mobilization of financial resources from all sources. And we have been working with countries and communities to protect and restore forests and critical ecosystems. So also many thanks to Elizabeth for the reminder of the announcements of funding from CBD COP 15.1, and also your recognition of the importance of a strong GEF replenishment. I'll leave it there for now. Thanks, William.
Thank you very much. Now the Netherlands, I think Mr. Vincent, please go ahead.
Unmute. Thank you, Chair. We wish to thank the Secretariat for preparing this informative update on the activities of the GEF in support of the multilateral environmental agreements for which it serves as the financial mechanism. We also read with great interest the relevant information on the Secretariat's activities related to other international conventions, institutions, and fora. We also appreciate the GEF's responses to the COP decisions. We have understood that the participation of the GEF CEO and chairperson in COP meetings of the conventions was highly appreciated by the parties. We noticed that despite the challenges of the current pandemic, the Secretariat managed to participate actively in relevant meetings and events in the reporting period from April to October this year. On the GEF's responses to the COP decisions, we wish to recall that in the reporting period, also the CBD and the Stockholm Convention held the first parts of their COPs, and that at the Stockholm COP, already a decision on the financial mechanism was adopted. We are looking forward to the GEF's responses to the relevant COP decisions of these conventions at GEF 62. With that point included, we can fully support the adoption of the recommended draft decision. Furthermore, we appreciate GEF's continued monitoring of the work and participation in the virtual intercessional work led by the President of the Intergovernmental Conference to elaborate the text of an international legally binding instrument under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversities in areas beyond national jurisdictions, the so-called BBNJ. We encourage GEF to continue such involvement with the BBNJ process. Finally, Co-Chair, we are pleased to learn on the advancing implementation of the long-term vision on complementarity, coherence, and collaboration of the GEF and the GCF. And we look forward to hearing further updates in the 62nd Council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Annette, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And a special and big thank you to all the secretaries of the conventions for their thorough reports and for this opportunity to discuss these further. I also heard your strong call for a ambitious replenishment, and you might be pleased to hear that as we are speaking in these minutes, my new minister is being handed over the staff for her office, and she is the former Minister of Environment from the last cabinet. So I'm sure she has a lot of understanding for the areas and topics we're discussing here at the moment. So Germany welcomes. I'd like actually to also thank the GEF Secretariat for their report on the relationships and synergies between the various conventions. But that report also included the topic of synergies with the climate fund, all the other climate funds. And that's something I found particularly interesting. And we especially welcome the joint statement to promote complementarity and synergies between the climate funds. I fully acknowledge the complexity of this, but again, as I said yesterday, this is a topic of access to finance, and particularly a reduction of barriers for accessing the climate funds is of importance. And I noted that You talked about the synergies between results and indicators and monitoring, evaluation, etc. you'd like to achieve. And I would be really interested in learning more about that. Also, I would be interested in learning more about the results of the annual meeting you held in Glasgow just recently. Also, Germany very much appreciates the continued collaboration between GEF and, for example, the Adaptation Fund, especially with regard to the exchange on gender. Germany encourages the GEF Secretariat to prepare a summarizing outcome document on the GEF Adaptation Fund gender collaboration and share it with the Council members. The collaboration on gender should also be intensified with other funds such as the GCF and the GEFs. Germany sees the intensified collaboration between the GEF and the GCF as vital. Beyond the more generic fields mentioned in the LTB, what are envisioned future fields of collaboration and clear delineations between GEF and GCF? Will the GEF Secretariat present a work plan for the implementation of the GCF-GEF LTV? Thanks very much for responses to my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Apologies to Liesel for having skipped, but we're going along. So Liesel, you have the floor.
Thank you, no problem. Please let me know if the connection is okay. Our constituency welcomes the report regarding GEF's relation to the conventions and is very grateful for today's presentations. We value that the GEF is continuously seeking to finance and implement activities with co-benefits in several areas. GEF is through the integrated programs part of and perhaps in the forefront of a global process of linking the efforts in different areas environment together, enhancing both impact and financial efficiency. We would welcome increased attention from the GEF to the co-benefits of fighting pollution and preserving biodiversity, as well as between pollution and climate, for instance, with regard to marine litter. We note that the GEF 7 evaluation encourages enhanced attention on pollution in the integrated programs. We welcome the annex detailing GEF's response to the guidance from the conventions. We value and encourage the continued cooperation between GEF and the secretariats. We have a couple of points from the individual conventions. On the UNCBD, we're looking forward to make sure the GEF 8 gives priority to the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework as the financial mechanism of the convention. Under the UNFCCC, in our view, the GEF has implemented the guidance to GEF from COP25 and CMA2 in a satisfactory manner. Though we would like to point out that the tradition from the current system to the enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement remains demanding for many developing countries, and GEF's support in this area is of utmost importance, enhancing transparency under the UNFCCC. We note that the GEF is ready to support developing country parties in preparing their biannual transparency reports. Under the Stockholm and Minamata, there's a widening gap between the financial needs to remediate the pollution crisis and the financial support available. The fourth conference of parties to the Minamata Convention met online on the 1st to 5th of November and appreciated setting out its priorities for GEF's support for the implementation of the convention. We would like to thank the CAO for being present at this meeting. Under the Stockholm Convention, important legally binding commitments, we are aware of the considerable challenges, in particular in phasing out PCBs with deadlines in 2025 and 2028, requiring of GEF to help devise future financing strategies and of ourselves to reach as far as possible in the replenishment. Thank you very much.
Liesel, Stéphanie for France, you have the floor.
Merci. Je vais m'exprimer en français. Nous remercions la disponibilité et les interventions des secrétaires exécutifs des conventions. La France tient à rappeler que le FEM est le seul mécanisme de financement de la Convention sur la diversité biologique, ainsi que des conventions BRS. Son rôle est donc majeur dans ces domaines, et c'est pourquoi nous soutenons une reconstitution ambitieuse. Avec une reconstitution ambitieuse, le FEM pourra jouer un rôle clé dans la mise en place de solutions concrètes avec co-bénéfices pour la lutte contre la perte de biodiversité, contre la dégradation des terres, contre les polluants, contre le changement climatique. Le FEM jouera un rôle particulièrement important dans la mobilisation des ressources pour la mise en œuvre du futur cadre post-2020 qui devrait être adopté à la COP 15 de la Convention pour la diversité biologique. Nous remercions aussi le leadership de Carlos Manuel dans les COP et les travaux avec toutes les conventions. Enfin, sur un point plus logistique, compte tenu des décisions adoptées par différentes conventions ou des discussions, résumés des discussions entre les parties, etc., nous souhaitons, pour assurer l'alignement du FEM avec les orientations proposées avec les conventions, nous demandons au secrétariat du FEM d'assurer en amont de la 3e réunion de reconstitution la transmission au Conseil et aux parties participants à la reconstitution et aux réunions de reconstitution de l'ensemble de ces documents reçus par le secrétariat relatifs aux priorités attendues pour FEM 8. Merci.
Merci, Stephanie. Rob, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. Ibrahim, Elizabeth, Rolf, Monica, thank you so much for those presentations. I always find your presentations so extremely informative and helpful, and I think it's really, really important that you come to our council meetings and report out on your work and on your priorities. Really, and it's especially important now as we're in the middle of the 8th replenishment. So really just want to say thank you so much for your contributions. And we, as always, we appreciate the ongoing coordination with the MEAs by the GEF Secretariat, including the GEF Secretariat's engagement at the Conference of the Parties. Similar to Switzerland and others, we heard the call for a strong replenishment and opportunities for increased integration, and we support these ambitions. I just have one technical point to Elizabeth on the CBD. At this stage anyway, I'll talk about the climate COP and outcomes from there after the next session. But with regard to the Convention on Biological Diversity, the GEF document on the relations with other conventions assumes that Kunming Declaration has standing, which it does not. The Kunming Declaration is a non-negotiated political statement by the People's Republic of China that was adopted by acclamation. While we are supportive of the GEF continuing to play a leading role in the financing of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, we do not want the Kunming Declaration taken out of context. And so in conclusion, the GEF will continue to play a critical role in ensuring global environmental outcomes from these relevant conventions. And again, really appreciate the time and information that you provided in all of your interventions today. So thank you very much. Over.
Thank you, Rob. Mette, you wanted the floor.
Thank you very much, William. Just wanted to remind the rest of the speakers on the list that at this point in time we will address comments and questions to the 4 executive secretary that we have here in this session, and we will save questions and comments to the other 2 parts of this session for later. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Laverne, you have the floor from the Caribbean.
Greetings from the Caribbean to all. I'd like to thank the executive secretaries for their presentation, and I will be so guided by our co-chair, in regards to her recent statement. I'd also like to concur with my colleague from Canada who mentioned the influence of the GEF in regards to the Great Green Wall. I saw somewhere where the impression was given that that came about from elsewhere, and so I think that goes to the whole discussion we've had in the past regarding the GEF and its visibility and persons being aware of where certain things originate. Quickly, I would like to say that the Caribbean constituency commends the GEF Secretariat for providing an update on its continued engagement and collaboration with the Executive Secretariat. of the MEAs for which it serves as a financial mechanism. The constituency continues to access the assistance provided through the conventions to meet reporting requirements and to undertake enabling activities that lend support to the attainment of global environmental benefits. We were pleased to receive the notification in regard to the availability of the early action grants to facilitate the conduct of early activities to ready all GEF eligible parties to undertake preparatory activities to prepare for the implementation of the global biodiversity framework. This is another tangible example of the commitment of the GEF to the advancement of the goals of the Convention on Biological Diversity. We use this opportunity to thank our esteemed CEO and his colleagues, the administrator of the UNDP and the executive director of UNEP for their collective action. I will end here and reserve my other comments for later. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you very much. Victoria from Austria, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. I'm not sure if my questions or comments fit now, but they're very brief, so I'll just make them anyways. It's 3 sentences. So we also appreciate the report from the convention representatives as well as the written update. As mentioned before, we at previous meetings, we are particularly pleased that the support for biennial transparency reports has been rolled out. And we also welcome the continued coordinated engagement with the GCF and encourage continued coordination with the GCF and other climate funds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That ends the list of speakers. Back to you, Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, William, and to all council members for having posed questions and comments to the 4 executive secretaries of the conventions. I will now give the floor to the executive secretaries in the same order that you had your interventions. So may I invite you first, Ibrahim, to comment on the council's interventions. Please.
Thank you very much, Mette, and thank you to all council members for your comments, actually your suggestions, and sometimes even your guidance. Very much appreciated. I will be very brief. There was one comment which was related to the UNCCD indirectly, which is related to nature-based solutions, and to what extent we see this, how is it being considered in our conventions. Nature-based solutions is a very important issue that is relatively new into our jargon as United Nations and I think as international community, but it has made tremendous progress. And we are very happy to see this progress happening. Just to give you an example, at the last climate COP, this was the climate COP, in Glasgow, and thanks to the UK and to our colleagues from the UNFCCC. There is some interference. I think I can continue. So I was saying that at the last climate COP in Glasgow, there were 2 declarations that came out, which we very much appreciated. One is the Declaration on Forest and Land Use, which I mentioned in my remarks, but there was another one on forest, agriculture, and commodity trade, so-called FACT, which was also made at the climate COP, which in my view was extremely important. Now, you may think that a climate COP is usually discussing about adaptation and mitigation and not about nature. And in this time round, I think delegates, and also thank you to the UK as host country, have played a very important role to make that more visible and more understanding. I remember just a couple of years ago how difficult it was to convince some climate negotiators that nature-based solutions was part of the solution. And I think we are seeing this, and I would like really to thank you all for as council members, but also you as parties to our different conventions to foster that cooperation and that synergy between the 3 conventions, or even more larger constituencies. If I may, I will just end with one comment. I have seen recently a very close collaboration between the GCF and the GEF, and we as Secretariat of a convention, we very much appreciate that. So I want to put that on record that Carlos Manuel and Yannick are really making our life much more easier in collaborating amongst themselves and also sending a signal to our respective parties and to their constituencies at the national level that this issue of synergy should be working. And again, I can give you the example of the Great Green Wall, which was initially supported by the GEF, and now GCF is coming also as a supporter. And there are many other processes that I think this collaboration is making life much easier and also helping in the implementation of the synergies between different conventions on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim, for your responses. Very useful. Now we will go to Elizabeth, Executive Secretary of the CBD. Please, the floor is yours to respond to comments and questions from the council members.
Thank you very much. First, my sincere thanks for all the statements made of the support in terms of the importance of GEF 8 looking at biodiversity related conventions, which of course include chemicals, because pollution is one of the primary drivers of biodiversity loss, and that's where our work with the chemicals come in, and that all these are prioritized at GEF 8. Then sincere thanks for at least 5 delegates who raised specific questions, which I will respond to them in the order they were made. The question from Switzerland with regards to the unfortunate postponement of our meetings in January and what effect will that have on the negotiations of the Global Biodiversity Framework moving forward. It's an unfortunate situation that pandemic is keeping us all on our toes, that we had to postpone our January meetings. Now we are actually still looking at not far dates. We are looking at the dates early March, hopefully still in Switzerland. We are still negotiating the venue, if we'll be available for the dates we want. And if we'll be able to meet in March, and if the pandemic situation, fingers crossed, also improves to reduce the restrictions currently imposed, then feel most likely the COP dates might be adjusted slightly, because we had planned to meet end of April to May. And by the rules of procedure, we need to have all documents with the parties at least 6 weeks before. So if we meet in March, then all these dates will need to be adjusted. However, our Bureau is yet to discuss on the future dates, and that will only happen once we confirm when our parties will be able to meet face-to-face to continue discussions on the three meetings which will have been held in January and now postponed. With regards to statement by the distinguished delegate from Brazil, in terms of now with the delayed meetings, what options does the GEF has in terms of not being able to receive the CBD or parties guidelines to GEF 8? I think what I could say here, the meetings which have already been held on the 2 subsidiary bodies on science and implementation have already discussed the matter, and there are draft recommendations there. And I think, and then that is 1. 2, on that basis, we have been having consultation with the GEF Secretariat on the best recommendations, proposals which could be presented. So we'll urge the GEF Council to consider these proposals in the interim, as opposed to postponing decisions until when the COP meets. Because in the event the decision is postponed, it means then implementation will equally be postponed. And I hope we don't want to get into that. Whether the question from the distinguished delegate of Spain, whether COP part 2 of COP will be delayed and how that will affect then the GEF 8 is what I've said, probably might be adjusted by some weeks to also take into account actually our earlier dates to respect the Ramadan, which apparently also was overlapping squarely with the initial proposed dates, which all of us had overlooked. Few words on the nature-based solutions. We are delighted, and I join Ibrahim here with regards to how nature-based solutions were really, was a center stage discussion at the climate COP. But fortunately, not yet a center stage discussion in the CBD discussions. We still have some parties who are skeptical about the concept, and therefore, in our for reasons that just the way Ibrahim indicated, it's a new concept. There's no yet, as it is alleged, UN universal definition or discussion of the term. So even our draft framework is referring to not just nature-based solutions, but nature-based solutions and or ecosystem-based approach, taking the two together, but also bearing in mind some sensitivity there in the use of the nature-based solutions, where some are seeing it has been developed in the climate context and not necessarily in the biodiversity context. With regards to the statement that the Kunming Declaration has no legal basis, fully agree. It was not adopted as a negotiated text. It was initiated by the government of China as the president and the organizer, initiator of the high-level segment. Of course, it was consulted by all parties. All parties had an opportunity to comment on it, but at the end of the day, it was not a negotiated text. So the statement by, I think, the US delegate is very correct. Thank you very much, Mette.
Thank you very much for these comments to the council members. Now, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Payet to respond to comments and questions related to your conventions, sir.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Just one point from the delegate from Switzerland on the farm program. Indeed, it's a very, very interesting project and a very interesting approach, and it will help, especially in addressing a number of pesticides, which are currently listed as POPs, but also a number of highly hazardous pesticides. It will also address, from what I've looked at, agricultural plastics, which is also a big issue, which really has not been, we have not been focusing on this, and I'm very happy with the FAO report, recent report, which came out yesterday or the day before yesterday, which highlighted the important role of agricultural plastics and how we deal with this in a life cycle approach. The main issue, of course, from the conventions, and this has links, as you know, with the Rotterdam Conventions, which also deals with the prior informed consent in the exchange of chemicals, including pesticides, is the issue of alternatives. And indeed, the COP, as well as the Chemical Review Committee, has highlighted a number of alternatives which are low cost and available. But there is still a big challenge in seeing how these can be made much more easily available to countries that find access to alternatives difficult. So I would like to see also that this project puts a lot of effort in looking at the issue of access to some of these low-cost alternatives. And of course, here I just want to add in a parenthesis the bold, ambitious program by Sri Lanka to actually reduce its dependence on both fertilizer and pesticides. And I think such a national initiative should be further encouraged. Of course, they have now faced serious problems with productivity, which highlights the important, and continued requirement for some of these chemicals. But it also highlights the fact that we can take those bold. And I think it ties in with the discussion in climate change and in biodiversity or nature-based solutions or ecosystem-based approaches. But I think it just shows us that it is possible when we have political commitment and political direction. And I think we can do a lot to support Sri Lanka. I mean, I've highlighted Sri Lanka here because they really were explicit from a political perspective on how they want to direct their future agriculture. So it just shows that there's possibilities for this. Of course, the age-old issue of stockpiles remains a big issue. Working with industry, I think, should be central in this program, because it's the chemicals industry producing those chemicals, and with them lies some of the solutions in allowing access to alternatives. There's the big issue of occupational safety, the issue of gender. I'm happy that the issue of gender is reflected in the program. This is a very important area, as we have a large proportion of women, and indeed in some countries, child labor is also being used in agriculture, and we should also be looking at this as it does impact not only on the ability to grow and to have good jobs, but the developmental ability is also affected through exposure in early childhood to pesticides. So in closing, I would just say I appreciate the collaboration with the GEF and with UNEP on this, and I also encourage better engagement with the FAO as well, who's been working on this for many years now. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Ralph, for responding to questions and comments from the Council. I do now invite Monica to comment to any of the interventions from the Council. Monica, please.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and let me also say that I very much appreciate both feedback and comments during this session. It has been very insightful, and there was at least one question from Switzerland asking about perception on chemicals and waste focal area as it is now presented in the programming document. We have been given possibility from Secretariat to provide input to this document and its various iterations, so we appreciate that. We have also provided comments to the latest round, and have, I would say, overall rather limited number of comments to the chemicals and waste focal area. Perhaps one point I would like to bring is about the fact and the wish to highlight in the next GEF round that the chemicals and waste programs and projects provide benefits and co-benefits to other focal areas and integrated programs. So we are working on this to try to think how we can help parties to better understand this contribution. But there is also likewise an expectation that other focal areas and integrated programs are also working on demonstrating their contributions to chemicals and waste focal area. And just to give one very explicit example, within Minamata Convention, emissions from industries is a major source of mercury, but this is also a major source of that is addressed under the Climate Change Convention. So there is whatever is done under the Climate Change Convention will definitely directly contribute to effectiveness or the bringing results for the Minamata Convention, vice versa. Maybe second reflection is that, as I mentioned, we are nearing the nearly full use of the allocation within GEF 7, which is an indication of the need. And then also what I also mentioned, that we have very specific deadlines that parties need to meet. And again, if I can give an example of emissions by the next year, 5 years since the entering of the convention into force, parties have to reduce emissions from new sources, and that these are mainly industries I've been also referring to in my speech, and they are reflected in the document. So, and then maybe as a small appetizer or hint, let me mention the upcoming second in-person segment of the Conference of the Parties. There is an important deadline, the convention for phasing out mercury added products. It was 2022. And we have already received 3 proposals to amend that specific annex to the convention to be considered at the upcoming COP. So not only the convention has these multiple and very near deadlines, but there is already a process to consider and in the long term ensure it is a convention that reflect the reality as much as is possible. So let me stop here, and again, thank you for this very insightful and rewarding, if I can say, discussion with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your comments and responses. Then it will only rest for me to thank you all 4 executive secretaries very much for your engagement and for this useful and important exchange with the Council. Thank you very much. Now we will continue to the second part of this agenda item. And the second part is a brief of the outcomes of the COP26 of the UNFCCC. We are pleased to have Mr. Uvais Sarmad, Deputy Executive Secretary of UNFCCC, with us that will present the outcomes of the COP26. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and great pleasure to be with you here. I hope you can hear me and see me.
Yes, we can see you also now and hear you very clearly. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, and it's a great pleasure for me to be with you and to address the GEF Council. And I'd like to particularly thank Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, great friend and colleague from GEF, the facility. And this is an important time for us, and I'd like to address the Council on key outcomes of COP26. Many have already talked about, but distinguished delegates, with the highest number of registrations and participation at COP26, I'm sure many of you were there. In Glasgow, we saw a very high level of engagement. 120 heads of states and governments were there, and one of the biggest UNFCCC conferences in history. I say that in particular because this happened in the middle of the pandemic, and seeing so many people coming in person just illustrated and demonstrated the importance and criticality of addressing climate change. So that was extremely important. The final package, as we have all heard in the media, in several media reports, was not perfect, but was clearly adopted in the spirit of a compromise. Yet it entails the most significant progress achieved since the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement rulebook, as it is referred to, was completed after 6 years of intense negotiations. The enhanced transparency framework was another accomplishment that got completed, which has now the agreed tables and formats and the outlines for reporting the progress that needs to be made. Another very major achievement was that phasing down of unabated coal power was mentioned for the first time in the UNFCCC process in the decision text, along with phasing out of inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. I will now cover a couple of a few specific achievements which are relevant to your discussion. And first is adaptation. Adaptation was central in the discussion that took place at COP26, within and outside of the negotiations. The topic was given an equal urgency and importance as mitigation. This was a call for action by many parties over the years. So this was a great, I believe, outcome. Parties established a work program to define the goal, the global goal on adaptation. This allows now to identify the collective needs and solutions for the climate impacts already happening now in all regions of the world. finance, all parties agreed that much more support needs to be provided to developing countries. They recognize that much more predictable finance for adaptation is needed, and this is what is central to the work of GEF. We therefore welcome the call to at least double finance for adaptation. It was also estimated that during COP26, $800 million were pledged for adaptation. But we also know, I don't want to sound unnecessarily optimistic about it, but the actual needs are very much beyond what is currently available, including the pledges at COP26. And as we all know, the 100 billion issue was not resolved at COP26, but there were positive signals that this goal will be achieved in 2022 or soon thereafter, and will be exceeded in the later years. The larger issue is not just about 100 billion. It is critical that we rapidly initiate the process for definition of the new global goal on finance, and we hope that will happen soon, preferably next COP. The emissions gap, to address it, parties collectively agreed to look for ways to increase actions to close the emissions gap. There can be absolutely no doubting the urgency of this task. It'll continue to be a significant area of focus as we move forward. It was also agreed that parties have not yet submitted new or updated nationally determined contributions and must do before the next COP in Sharm el-Sheikh in 2022. There will also be annual high-level ministerial roundtable on the pre-2030 ambition and annual dialogue to strengthen ocean-based action. And finally, the big takeaway or big outcome at COP26 was the finalization of the guidelines for the full implementation of the Paris Agreement. After 6 years of arduous negotiations, we have reached compromise on the pending issue of Article 6, the carbon markets. Operationalizing Article 6 will allow now parties and many stakeholders to scale up their cooperation, mobilize additional finance and private sector engagement, and ensure that the rules are the same for everyone. And as I already mentioned, the finalization of negotiations on the enhanced transparency framework will now allow parties to continue to build the much needed trust and confidence in the process, which is also extremely crucial in moving forward. We also witnessed significant announcements in the non-process part of COP, including announcements to finance forestry, ending coal, and work specific to cities and communities. Now, very briefly to look ahead, including for the COP27 next year, despite all the accomplishments, as I mentioned in COP26 in Glasgow, we are still far off the trajectory for stabilizing global temperature rise at 1.5 degrees. While COP26 was an important step forward and it moved the needle in the right direction, our work and work of the parties and everybody, all stakeholders, need to continue intensely towards COP27. And that will include, as I mentioned, finance, the 100 billion, and possibly greater commitment going forward. Also critical that the new goal on finance and also the adaptation that I mentioned is fully implemented as soon as possible. And it is also clear that adaptation will remain a major area of focus for COP27. The GEF has played a critical role in operationalization of the Convention and the Paris Agreement. I particularly would like to thank the GEF for the valuable contribution it has made to the success of the COP26 in Glasgow and during the very challenging 2 years leading up to it. However, the work only has started in Glasgow, as we're still far off, as I said, the trajectory of stabilizing global temperatures. We must see much more climate action this decade to achieve the goal. As parties embark on work to turn their enhanced ambition into action, they will look to the financial and technical support from the GEF to make their ambition a reality. And that's the work of all of us now going forward. And I very much value the engagement of the GEF Council and your commitment and that you using your constituencies to help achieve these goals. And I very much also encourage GEF Secretariat to remain as ambitious as they always have been, and to count on our full support from UNFCCC to make the changes that we need, the transformational changes to remain within 1.5 degree. Thank you very much, and back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much for your information and updates, and also for looking forward to COP27. Now I would like to invite the council members to pose any questions and comments to the UNFCCC Deputy Executive Secretary that we have with us here today. May I ask the Secretary of the Convention to announce the list of speakers, please, William?
Certainly. Floor is open. Thank you. Ben, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just coming in as no one else seems to be jumping in there just yet. Just to say, just actually speaking from Glasgow, many thanks for that, the summary of the outcomes from the Glasgow COP26 by the Deputy Executive Secretary. That was a very helpful reminder of all of that. We also welcome the GEF Secretariat's participation at COP26 in Glasgow. It was very valuable to meet colleagues from the Secretariat and others in person as well. Just two brief points, just noting the specific calls from parties and the support for transparency at COP26, which was mentioned in the reports which we're receiving today, and also in the information document on the financing for CBIT, which is enabling countries to report beyond the initial allocations which are provided under GEF 7. Also noting that the CMA3 cover decisions reference to the COP Catalyst and GEF working together, including with the Access Task Force, to improve support for transparency. I'll leave it there, but many thanks for your speech and intervention there. Thanks.
Thank you. Carlos Manuel, you have the floor.
Yes, thanks. And thanks, Vice, for joining us in the council meetings. I would like to congratulate the UNFCCC Secretariat and the host nation of COP26 for the great outcomes. As a former climate negotiator, I'm extremely happy that after 5 years of hard work, we were able to close the Paris Rulebook with an agreement on Article 6 that was extremely important. But also for us, the GEF Secretariat, it's extremely important to mention that we receive guidance from the COP. Guidance that is very much aligned with our climate change proposal, our proposal to integrate climate change within all the different sectors, not just from the economic and policy making processes, but also from the different GEF financial windows. I will be sending in the next few days a copy of the mandate that we received from the COP. So all council members are very well informed about the specific mandate that we received from COP26. And last but not least, I want also to mention that we had a very successful joint investment and partnership with the Green Climate Fund, with our pavilion during COP26. We had more than around 50 different events with hundreds of people attending online and in person, which was a great event that we did together with our colleagues from the Green Climate Fund as part of this common joint effort with regards to the long-term vision. So thank you so much. And I will be sending to all council members the very specific mandate that we received from the COP Vice. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much. Gabriela, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, William, and thanks to Vice for his intervention. Well, first, let me express our appreciation to the UK and the UNFCCC Secretariat for the organization of COP26 in person in the midst of a pandemic. It was an intense time. Personally, I was there for the entire session, and it was very well organized with all the special securities and so on. So we greatly appreciate your effort. Thank you so much to facilitate this. I have one comment or question to the GEF Secretariat, which is in relation to also OVICE intervention and the decisions taken in Glasgow with regards to the increase of adaptation support. First, we want to comment again that this increase for adaptation support to developing countries should not be at the cost of mitigation support. And in that regard, we would like to hear from the GEF Secretariat how you are planning to address this strong call in the context of your portfolio. And then there was very detailed guidance to provide support for developing countries for the implementation of the enhanced transparency framework. And we would like to hear again also from the GEF Secretariat how you're planning to operationalize this quite detailed set of guidance in that regard. A comment to the delivery plan from developed countries on the 100 billion. It clearly states we are aiming to achieve the 100 billion in 2023. We understand that is too late, but it's already much earlier than it looked like before the COP. So I do think the fact of increasing ambition at the COP has also triggered additional commitments in that regard. And we stand to that promise, I would say, that we have given in that plan. Then there is, we would also like to state that we request the GEF Secretary to include the suite of guidance in the context of the GEF replenishment discussions and reflect that adequately in the programming document. I understand this is not a council issue, but still, since we have a space for interaction, would like to frame that. And then a comment or a question to the UNFCCC Secretariat to advise whether you are ready to provide the sufficient staff from your end to collaborate with the GEF Secretariat specifically on the costing exercise. So there was guidance speaking to the costing of BTRs, and here we believe it would be helpful to also have strong collaboration with the Secretariat on the implementation of the detailed guidelines and tables that have been agreed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabriela. Rob, you have the floor.
Great, thank you, William, and thank you very much for that presentation. It was very helpful. I'm going to build on Gabriela's comments just now about the BTRs. We heard recipient countries at the COP make a clear case for additional support for the transparency reporting from the GEF. And guidance given by the parties to the Paris Agreement requested that GEF consider a higher funding volume for biennial transparency reports and further consider ways to increase the efficiency of delivering that support, including through potentially bundling multiple BTR requests into a single application. We know the GEF has been engaged in assessing the average cost of BTR reporting and would encourage this to continue and appreciate the work with the Climate COP on that. We would also encourage the GEF to continue discussing with a wide range of countries their reporting processes and associated costs. Of course, we recognize that this is not the only funding available for transparency programs like the CBIT. Programs like CBIT also provide much needed support to build reporting systems and the associated capacity. We agree there may be opportunities to further streamline applications, for example, by bundling two BDR requests into a single application. However, we also understand that a higher funding volume or bundled application requests would require an upward adjustment of the ceiling for expedited enabling activities from its current value of $1 million, an action that would require a council decision. Given that given that the first BTRs are due in December 2024, which is quite soon, and that any change in costs for those BTRs would need to be incorporated into the current replenishment cycle, we would like to ask if the Secretariat has advanced any thinking on their response to this package of guidance since the COP, and separately inquire if the question of an expedited sealing to be placed on the agenda for the second council meeting. Thanks so much. I'll stop there and look forward to your responses. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That ends the list of speakers. Back to you, Co-Chair.
Thank you, William, and thank you to council members for your comments and question. I will first invite Uwais to respond to the question and comments before I give the floor to the secretariats afterward. But Uwais, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the delegations who took the floor. And I'd like to briefly comment on each of those. UK, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for being a great host of COP26, and we very much look forward to working on the UK presidency in the coming year. And all the points that you mentioned about transparency, finance, and GEF working closely with us and GCF and others, we will certainly work on that. And thanks also to Carlos Manuel on all the comments that you made. The collaboration that you mentioned between GEF and GCF, including, of course, with us, you can count on our absolutely full support, and we are ready to engage at all levels. Switzerland, Gabriela, good to see you, and thank you for your comments. And with regard to your question about the costing exercise, that I can confirm that our team within the transparency division is fully equipped and very much geared up to work closely with the GCF administration in the BTRs, as also was mentioned by the USA, because that was clearly highlighted by many developing countries at the COP, that they need that support in complying with the BTRs, and to ensure that we track the average cost of BTR, and just basically to enable the BTRs to be completed in a timely, transparent, and a responsible manner. And our teams are fully prepared to reach out and step up their engagement and support. So we'll be working very, very closely with the GCF administration. So you will hear more about this, but do let us know if there is anything more we can do, or if you have any concrete and specific recommendations, we'll be happy to follow. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Now I will give the floor to the Secretariat to respond to the questions directed to you. Will you start, Carlos Manuel?
I'll pass it over to Gustavo.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel. Thanks, Mete, and thanks for the questions. Let me go over to the best of my ability here. There were so many questions that came from in response to the presentations by the executive secretaries. First, I think that many of you asked about how we are incorporating existing guidance, or how we are planning to do that given the delays in decisions with respective COPs. As Carlos Manuel mentioned, thankfully we already have guidance from UNFCCC that came from Glasgow, and those will be referred to accordingly. On CBD, as Elizabeth Marema very aptly described, we continue to liaison directly with the CBD Secretariat on the development of the Global Biodiversity Framework. We have, as you may have noticed in the program directions before, incorporated some of the elements of the draft GBF in the current strategy. There's some expectation that the general framework will be eventually positively deliberated upon. So that's how we are following this. Of course, we are also following the negotiations more closely and we'll be attending the upcoming SBs to ensure that there's continued alignment. In regards to, I think it was France's question, and that relates also to something that Gabriela from Switzerland mentioned as well, in terms of providing a list of documents that we're using. I'm not sure how practical we can make that, because this is it's ever changing as we go along. What we are doing as a practice, and of course we are in your hands if this is acceptable, we are referencing in the programming documents, programming directions, the decisions that are relevant to the different priorities according to the guidance that at the level that we receive them as anticipated in the GEF instrument, and making reference to where that is, like we're doing for the GBF, like we'll do now for the guidance coming from UNFCCC, so you can have a direct connection between what has been deliberated and how that's reflected in programming directions. And this is because there are some elements of guidance that are not necessarily that relevant or are needed to be made operational in the programming directions directly. So we, given the uncertainties in terms of meetings that are coming as well, if we can continue to use that practice and making sure that the document's well referenced, maybe we can proceed with that suggestion, but of course, be happy to hear from you. On the question on BRS guidance, the BRS guidance was not included in the Relations and Conventions paper because of the report of the meeting was not available at the time that we had to prepare and post the document. And the response we provided to all of you, to the council, for your approval prior to the GEF providing an addendum to the COP report to be submitted at the COP, the in-person COP of the BRS, as is requested by the online segment of the BRS COP. Regarding the BBNJ, this is an interesting point. There's no, I think, consensus across all the GEF 8 replenishment participants in what's the level of referencing that we should be making to the ongoing negotiations. Some parties have been pushing us to make it more explicit, others that we should be a little bit more cautious and not try to anticipate what might still be deliberated. But anyways, the GEF has been participating in at the request of the negotiators at times in the negotiations as an observer. And I would like to also note that regardless of the outcomes, the draft GEF 8 strategy and what we've been doing in GEF 7 and prior to that on the high seas, we are proposing to continue supporting investments in areas beyond national jurisdiction, which at least indirectly supports the processes that exist around the BBNJ convention negotiations. Germany asked about the LTV and how we are engaging with the Green Climate Fund and also engagement with Adaptation Fund. We have been discussing, we have a steering committee across the two secretariats, the GCF Secretariat and the GEF-SEC Secretariat, to discuss and agree on work programs. So we have actually had the first meeting of the steering committee at the meeting in Glasgow at COP26. And we will be presenting a joint report to the GEF Council and to the GCF board in our next council meeting. That report will include an update on the work program and also more details on the tasks that have been undertaken. The work program is continued to be discussed and worked on at the steering committee, and joint activities that have started include, for example, what we've done in COP26 with the joint pavilion that served as a meeting point and discussions on climate finance across the two funds and other funds that also participated in many of the events that we had there. We had joint events on Great Green Wall, on Amazon, that brought very concrete collaboration and synergies and complementarity discussions in relation to what the GEF is doing as well as the GCF plans to do. We are also informing the countries and agencies about opportunities to convene, and also working together to identify a longer and more elaborated list of initiatives beyond what I just mentioned, like Great Clean Wall initiatives to include, for example, work on SIDS and LDCs. Let me see what else I may have missed here. While I'm looking, I would like to ask Chiz to address, first of all, Gabriela, on your question about climate finance, adaptation versus mitigation. Of course, this is in the case of the GEF, this comes from different channels, right? We have our adaptation funds, SCCF and LDCF. They are dedicated funds for adaptation. And then we have the GEF Trust Fund, which supports climate change mitigation under the climate change focal area. So they come from different channels, and it's hard to define, how a trade-off would exist with this kind of arrangement. But glad to discuss that tension there a little further. Let me see here. I would like to ask now Chiz to address the questions that were related to the enhanced transparency framework, our support to BTRs, the costing of these enabling activities, because these are important aspects that we are already considering in the development, not only the programming directions, but also the financial scenarios associated with the means of implementation of GEF 8 strategy. So Chiz, why don't you take over here on the ETF and related matters, please.
Great, thank you very much, Gustavo. Very quickly on the support to be provided on enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement. That constitutes two elements, broadly speaking. One is the support for the biennial transparency report, the BTRs, that got mentioned by a number of council members. And the other element is the support for CBIT, Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency. On the question of enhancing support for the BTRs, in order for us to come up with the original figures, we had two informal consultations with countries as well as CCC Secretariat personnel, as well as a number of CGE members on a personal capacity participating. So we had that meeting to come up with a costing, I believe in June of 2020, as well as November 2020. And based on that conversation and being informed by the National Communications and BUR costing, we came up with a costing. Obviously, with the feedback we received from parties, we will revisit this. And our plan is to have somewhat of a similar organization of informal conversations with interested countries as well as CCC and agencies that are taking part in this kind of support to come up with the costing structure. In terms of the question of bundling, as well as how we can enhance the efficiency of the support, this obviously also includes the element after the GEF Council or the CEO approves these types of enabling activity support. So we have actually started to also have informal conversations with agencies that are engaged in providing support for this kind of work to see if there are elements that we can look into to make modifications to make the timeline of support going from the approval all the way to the actual submission of reports to be done in a more enhanced and timely manner. Just so that the council members are aware, as of now, for the support of the biennial update reports, BURs, we can't go from the submission until the submission of the proposal until the actual submission of the report to CCC in 27 months. So we're not necessarily talking about significant delays that would need to be taken into consideration for the GEF partnership to be able to help countries to be able to report back to the CCC Secretariat on every 2 years. But anyway, with that in mind, we're looking into this. We will have these consultations on costing, and we will also continue to have conversations on how we can streamline the process even further. And last but not least, on the question from the United States, if based on the costing as well as this conversation, if it's necessary for us to raise the ceiling for the enabling activities, yes, we will come back to council for this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I do not see any further council members asking for the floor, and this ends our discussion on this part of the session. I would like to sincerely thank Owais Sarman, the Deputy Executive Secretary of UNFCCC, for your engagement and for having this useful and important exchange with the GEF Council. Thank you very much for joining us today. Now we have gone 15. Oh, Carlos Manuel, would you like the floor, please?
Excuse me, Mette, the communication was breaking down. I didn't hear you for the last 30 seconds. Can you repeat?
Yeah, so I was thanking our guest, the Deputy Executive Secretary Owais Sarman, for his engagement and participation. On part of the council, we greatly appreciate his engagement and thank him for joining us today.
Okay, perfect. Nothing on my side, Mette.
Thank you. Now we are moving into the third part of this agenda item. We have gone 15 minutes over our timetable, but with your permission, I ask that we finish this agenda item today. So if I see no objection to that, we will continue with the third part of this agenda item, which is the, I see no one asking for the floor, so thank you very much for that. We will now consider the document GEF/C61/07, relation with conventions and other international organizations that has been provided to you. This document will not be formally introduced, and I will just open the floor for any comments from the council to this document. I will now give the floor to William, who will be announcing the list of speakers.
Thank you. The floor is open. A couple of council members have already commented on it, so we can take it as given. Gisela, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. I would like, first of all, thanks for providing this document, which clearly states that the holding of the 7th Assembly has already been planned and budgeted within the framework of GEF 7 replenishment negotiation with this estimated budget of $1.7 million.
Sorry, Gisela,
yeah?
we're not talking about the Assembly. We're in the third part of the relations with conventions item. So
I apologize. I missed something for a technical problem, and I thought that we were on the other item. Apologies.
That's fine. No
apologies.
We'll probably pick that one up tomorrow. Now we're going to finish relation with conventions. So let me give the floor to Renato next. Thank you.
Thank you, William, and I'll try to be very brief. Just to highlight some of the activities and data covered on the report are already outdated, which means that GEF may have not captured what have transpired in the other conventions. This has been said here previously by the representatives of the convention. So in this regard, we would like to hear from the Secretariat how it plans to keep this report always updated in light of the pandemic and the impact and the way it is affecting international convention calendars. Secondly, I would like to know from the Secretariat on the status of the first stage of cooperation between GEF and GCF under the recently approved long-term vision on complementary coherence and collaboration between the GCF and the GEF, developed jointly by the two fund secretariats. We see with optimism the strengthening of cooperation between these two funds, taking into account their respective mandates, and look forward to seeing this partnership starting to solidify over time. In this regard, we'd like to know particularly the stage, if there is any, of cooperation regarding GEF projects in the Amazon region, with the GCF IBD, Amazon Bioeconomy Fund, which has just been approved in the last GCF Council meeting last October. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you. Renato Laverne, you have the floor.
Thank you. The constituency also supports continued engagement with the international institutions such as the Adaptation Fund, Green Climate Fund, and the UN Permanent Forum. And the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. At CIS, we are cognizant that in order to achieve the transformational change envisioned through a sustainable green recovery, there will be need for enhanced collaboration. It was noted that the LTV has been discussed within the context of the advancement of partnership and climate change priorities articulated in the UN Secretary General's Our Common Agenda, and an LTV steering committee is in place. We support efforts as outlined for the GEF and the GCF to explore opportunities to collaborate on specific projects and programs, and to expand the portfolio of interventions of countries that can access coordinated financial support. However, we would not want this process to be solely a top-down, but informed from dialogue and feedback on proposed approaches from the GEF PFPs and OFPs and the GCF NDA or focal points. In addition, the Caribbean constituency would not want the envisioned collaboration to impact the various windows available to SIDS, such as the STAR allocation, thereby reducing access by countries within the constituency categorized as middle to high income based on the metric of GDP per capita, which by no means captures the environmental and sustainability issues that plague these countries, but appears to impact on the engagement with other mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Karen, you have the floor.
Thank you. I will be very brief. Sweden welcomes the report, and we also support the draft decision as drafted. And we haven't taken the floor before, but we obviously welcome also the guidance provided by the parties to the 5 conventions as discussed earlier. And finally, we encourage GEF to continue exploring potential synergies between conventions and multilateral climate funds towards greater effectiveness and impact. And in that respect, we are looking forward to the joint report that Gustavo was mentioning just earlier. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That ends the list of speakers. Back to you, Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, William, and thank you to council members for their questions and comments. I will now invite the Secretariat to respond. I think we will have Gustavo and then Shizuru. Gustavo, would you start, please?
Sure. Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. I have there was a clarification from Gabriela on the prior question, and in terms of what she meant by the question on climate change adaptation vis-a-vis the GEF Trust Fund. And with respect to that, of course, the focal area is dedicated primarily to mitigation. But we have, as we had from staff today, mainstream the requirement to agencies to conduct and include in the project design a full climate risk assessment, of course, that entails looking at the climate change adaptation connections, which follows the guidelines that staff has set for itself. And we believe that this way we are, for lack of a better term, climate proofing GEF Trust Fund investments and ensuring that climate risk is incorporated in the design. And the question that Brazil provided about the document that we provide relations to conventions, we update this document every 6 months when we present it to the council. we have to stop at a certain stage to be able to not only elaborate but also post the document. And as I mentioned earlier, in relation to BRS, what we do on occasion in between council meetings is to update our COP reports. In that case, when there is a need for that, and in that sense, we can continue to report on how the GEF is engaging with the respective conventions. In respect also to Renato's question on LTV and others, so we have, as I mentioned earlier, just a few weeks ago at COP26, held our first steering committee meeting, in which we set up a few concrete activities that we will be following, and we will present in the next council meeting jointly, meaning to our council and to GCF's board, a report on the activities that are being undertaken in relation specifically to the question of the Amazon and the Amazon Sustainable Landscapes program that the GEF finances, as well as the upcoming new bioeconomy fund. We have already engaged, and we have had actually events during the COP in Glasgow, bringing these lines together. We actually had the IDB there, which is the implementing agency for the GCF on that. And so we are actively engaged in that discussion, including with the countries. And to Lavern's point, of course, this entails a bottom-up approach that includes, of course, the countries as well. And I understand the point that you made about not negatively affecting country allocations or distorting country priorities through this process, which is absolutely not the intention. The intention is the other way around, to be able to see that both funds and the other funds as needed are best involved with you in supporting your priorities at the country level. And just a point that was raised by Sweden on synergy conventions, we continue to do that. And actually during the COP26, again, in the GEF GCF Pavilion, we hosted the Rio Conventions Pavilion, which is a program that was entirely dedicated to synergies between conventions, in this case, specifically the Rio Conventions. But we have a longstanding work with the secretariats of the three conventions, the Rio Conventions plus the GEF, in stimulating more integrated thinking across the board. Thank you very much, Matty, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gustavo. Shizuru, did you like to comment on any of the questions?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Just very quickly, on the question from Brazil in terms of updating the report, I'd like to point out that there will be a number of COP reports that the GEF Secretary will prepare to submit to the upcoming COPs, and they will all be going to council members for council approved by mail. So in that process, you will receive the updated and extensive decisions adopted by the previous COPs and how the GF is responding. So you will get that most updated information through the decision by mail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this completes our discussion on this agenda item. I see the interventions in the chat. Thank you very much for that. And I invite now the council to adopt the draft decision included in document GEF/C.61/07. I see no one asking for the floor, and the decision is adopted. Thank you very much. Before I give the floor back to Carlos Manuel for ending today's effort, I would just like to thank you all very much for your work today. Thank you very much. And back to you, Carlos Manuel.
Thanks, Mette, and I would like to echo your comments. Thanking everybody for the very productive session of today. We have passed almost half an hour our agreed time. So I would like to propose that our last agenda item for today, which is agenda item number 11, note on the organization of the 7th GEF Assembly will be moved to tomorrow. So tomorrow we will begin with this agenda item, followed by the work program for the GEF Trust Fund, the assessment of the pilot on adjusted co-sharing arrangements, and we will finalize tomorrow with the agenda items on other businesses. So with this, I would like to close today's council session, wishing the best. And as usual, we will begin tomorrow, 7 a.m. DC time. Have a good day to everybody, and thanks again for a productive session. Bye. Muchas gracias.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Gracias, adiós. Bye-bye.
Gracias, Brenda.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Gracias.
Bye-bye.